The story begins with a fierce duel, where two extraordinary blades collide again and again without breaking. Watching the exchange, one warrior realizes that the blacksmith behind the weapons may be even more remarkable than the fighters using them. After the battle, a horned woman corners the quiet craftsman and asks the question that has been bothering her: who forged his sword? Her curiosity immediately puts him on edge, because the answer would reveal far more than he wants anyone to know. She presses him to abandon his secluded life and use his overwhelming talent more openly. After seeing what his weapons did against powerful monsters, she is convinced that his skill belongs on a far greater stage. The woman refuses to accept his modest excuses. To her, the so-called blacksmith is clearly hiding power and craftsmanship that no ordinary artisan could ever possess. The scene shifts to the same man living quietly at his forge. After finishing another job, he sets his tools aside and prepares to eat, showing that his present life is far calmer than the dramatic reputation surrounding his weapons. As he looks over the peaceful land around his home, the man reflects that a long time has passed since he first arrived in this world. His memories return to the day his former life ended. He rushed into danger to save a black cat, only to be struck and killed in the process. Floating in an unfamiliar white space, he hears a mysterious young woman address him. She calmly confirms that there is no longer any way for him to return to the life he just lost. Once the shock wears off, he accepts that he is dead and asks why the accident happened. The strange girl explains that saving the cat drew him into a problem far larger than a simple traffic accident. The girl reveals that she serves as a kind of guardian who watches over different worlds. Her youthful appearance is only a convenient form, not her true identity. She admits that the black cat was a temporary body connected to her work. Although the accident was never meant to kill him, his intervention disrupted the transfer she was attempting. Because he died through her mistake, she offers compensation. She can send him to another world, support his new life, and grant him an ability suited to the path he chooses. Rather than asking for glory or limitless combat power, he says he wants a quiet life where he can make useful things with his own hands. His restrained wish surprises the guardian, who expected something far more extravagant. The guardian points out that a second life will still be dangerous and offers him a powerful advantage. He refuses anything too absurd, asking only for enough knowledge and ability to live independently. He thinks back on his exhausting former life as a programmer, where long hours and constant pressure consumed nearly all of his time. That experience is exactly why he no longer wants wealth or status. For his new life, he chooses the ability to create practical tools and weapons. He hopes that making things for others will let him live peacefully, while still giving his existence some meaning. He adds that he has always been interested in swords, armor, and handcrafted equipment, even though his previous life never gave him the chance to pursue that passion. The Guardian agrees to shape his new abilities around that desire. With the terms settled, the Guardian thanks him and sends him away. A flash of light swallows his body as his second life finally begins. He falls through a brilliant passage between worlds, surrounded by light until the unfamiliar land below rapidly approaches. He wakes beneath a tree in a dense forest, aching from the transfer and completely unsure of where he has landed. As he forces himself upright, he notices that his new body feels stronger and healthier than the one he had before. The realization confirms that his old life has truly ended. He checks the belongings provided for him and studies the unfamiliar forest. Although he possesses basic knowledge of this world, he still has no idea what dangers may be hiding nearby. A small wooden house appears among the trees. With no better shelter available, he cautiously approaches and opens the door. Inside, he finds a simple but livable cabin containing a kitchen, bedroom, storage space, and a water supply. There is no electricity or modern convenience, but everything he needs to survive is present. The greatest surprise waits in the adjoining workshop, a complete forge. The sight of the anvil, furnace, tools, and workbench immediately awakens the craftsman inside him. He examines the workshop in disbelief and realizes that it contains nearly everything required for blacksmithing. Even the materials and equipment have been prepared, as though the Guardian designed the house specifically for him. Testing one of his new abilities, he produces a tiny flame and uses it to light the forge. The spell is modest, but it is more than enough for the practical life he intends to build. Before beginning serious work, he explores the surrounding area and searches for essential resources. A nearby stream means he will not need to worry about water. The forest is rich with plants and natural materials, but he remains cautious. He has no reliable knowledge of the local monsters, poisonous vegetation, or other threats that may exist beyond the cabin. Continuing his survey, he finds a broader water source and studies the terrain around his new home. The isolated location is ideal for a quiet life, provided he can learn to survive there. His peaceful exploration ends when he discovers an unconscious beast woman lying in the grass. Her wounds and exhausted condition make it clear that she will die if left alone. After confirming that the injured woman is still breathing, he lifts her into his arms and carries her back toward the cabin, deciding that saving her must come before everything else. Back at the cabin, he carefully removes the beast woman's ruined outer clothing so he can reach her injuries. He cleans the blood away, applies medicine, and binds each wound while doing everything possible to preserve her dignity. His enhanced knowledge guides his hands as he checks for hidden injuries and stabilizes her condition. Although he has never treated a patient before, the abilities granted with his new body allow him to work with surprising precision. He cools her fever and prepares simple medicine, watching closely for any change in her breathing. Once her condition begins to settle, he allows himself to believe that she may survive the night. Exhaustion finally catches up with him after the emergency treatment. Even so, his thoughts turn toward the many things he still needs to prepare before he can truly begin life as a blacksmith in this isolated forest. The next morning, a casual greeting suddenly comes from the bed. The injured beast woman has awakened and is already studying the stranger who saved her. Seeing her conscious marks the first real turning point of his new life. What began as a solitary existence in the forest now includes an unexpected guest with cat ears and a guarded expression. The beast woman immediately checks her injuries and demands to know what happened. He explains that he found her unconscious and treated the wounds that would otherwise have killed her. Embarrassed by how much of her body he may have seen, she questions him directly. He swears that he only exposed what was necessary to assess and treat her injuries, and that he did nothing improper. After watching his reaction, she decides to believe him. Her tension eases, and she quietly thanks him for saving her life. He gives her clean clothing to wear and explains that her original clothes were soaked in blood, forcing him to cut them away during treatment. She accepts the explanation, while he tries not to make the situation any more awkward. She dismisses the ruined outfit as nothing more than old rags, then asks whether the cabin belongs to him and what kind of work he does in such a remote place. He answers that he is a blacksmith, though he admits he only arrived and settled in the cabin the previous day. The beast woman finds that difficult to believe, since she never knew a house existed in this part of the forest. She explains that they are in the eastern side of the Black Forest, far from the routes she normally uses. While resting there the previous day, she encountered a massive black bear and was nearly killed. The danger of the forest suddenly becomes very real to him. She estimates that her wounds will prevent her from hunting or exploring for roughly 2 weeks, despite beast folk normally having stronger bodies than humans. Since he needs help with housework and blacksmithing, he proposes that she stay at the cabin as his assistant. In exchange, he will provide food and shelter until her injuries have healed. After checking his scent and finding nothing suspicious, the beast woman accepts the temporary arrangement. She agrees to remain under his care until she can move normally again, while leaving her longer-term decision for later. The two finally exchange names. The cat-eared woman introduces herself as Samia, while the blacksmith gives his full name as Eizo Tanya, prompting her to laugh at how unfamiliar it sounds. Once the introductions are complete, Samia sincerely thanks Eizo for rescuing her. The awkwardness between them begins to fade as they address each other by name for the first time. That evening, Eizo prepares a place for Samia to sleep and thinks about how poorly the one-room cabin is suited to 2 people. He decides that expanding the house will soon become necessary. Samia accepts the sleeping arrangement without complaint and thanks him again. For now, both agree to make do with the limited space while her injuries continue to heal. The next morning, Eizo begins his first real day as a blacksmith. He heats a piece of metal at the forge and sets out to make a practical knife. His granted knowledge tells him exactly when to remove the glowing metal and how to strike it. Each blow shapes the steel more efficiently than his complete lack of real-world experience should allow. As he continues hammering, the mysterious support built into his new abilities guides his timing and force. The rough lump of metal rapidly begins to resemble a proper blade. Eizo notices that his new body has also become much stronger. The heavy work that should exhaust him feels natural, confirming that the Guardian improved both his craftsmanship and physical ability. Once the blade reaches the correct shape, he rehets it and carefully quenches the steel. The process hardens the metal without damaging the edge. He moves to the finishing stage, polishing the surface and refining the blade until every line is clean. Standing at his own workbench, he finally feels like his second life has truly begun. The support ability continues correcting his smallest movements, guiding the blade toward an ideal form. What emerges is far better than anything a first-time blacksmith should be capable of producing. Eizo completes his first knife and immediately begins considering what to make next. A kitchen knife would be useful for daily life, especially now that he must cook for 2 people. He tests the new blade and is stunned by its sharpness. The knife cuts through the material with almost no resistance, proving that his so-called ordinary craftsmanship is already exceptional. Realizing how dangerous such an edge could be, Eizo resolves to handle his creations carefully. He begins preparing additional tools, including a safer knife that Samiya can use. After finishing his work, Eizo wakes Samiya and checks how she feels. Her recovery is progressing quickly, though he still warns her not to push her injured body too soon. Using his newly forged kitchen knife, Eizo prepares a warm meal. Samiya watches with interest as the blade makes cooking effortless, and the two share their first proper dinner together. After several days of work, Eizo finishes a full set of knives and calls Samiya into the workshop. He wants a second opinion before taking any of them outside the forest. He presents the first knife and asks Samiya to test the grip. The simple-looking handle fits her hand comfortably, and the blade feels unusually well-balanced. Samiya tries the knife on a piece of wood and slices through it far more easily than expected. Her startled reaction confirms that Eizo's first products are anything but ordinary. Examining the clean cut, Samiya tells him the knife works almost too well. Eizo begins to understand that even his supposedly standard creations may exceed the quality commonly available in this world. Samiya continues testing the edge on thicker material, only for the blade to pass through with little resistance. Eizo watches carefully, increasingly aware that he must be cautious about how he sells his work. Her enthusiastic testing grows dangerous when she starts cutting through pieces near his workbench. Eizo quickly stops her before the exceptionally sharp knife damages something important. Once she calms down, Samata asks whether he could make a hunting knife of similar quality. Eizo agrees and begins considering whether selling his products in town could support their quiet life. Samiya offers to guide him to the nearest town and help with the sale. Eizo accepts, deciding that this will be the first real test of his new blacksmithing business. With a batch of finished knives ready, Eizo's life as a working blacksmith officially begins. He prepares to leave the safety of the forest and enter local society for the first time. Before departing, Samiya changes into more suitable traveling clothes and asks about the day's plan. Eizo confirms that they will visit town, sell the knives, and purchase supplies. The pair set out together through the Black Forest. Eizo carries the merchandise while Samiya, now recovered enough to travel, leads him along the safest route. As they walk, Eizo notices how worn Samiya's equipment has become. He quietly considers replacing some of it once their finances improve, though she treats the battered gear as perfectly normal. Samiya explains that many dangerous creatures inhabit the forest, but most keep their distance from experienced beastfolk. Eizo remains alert, knowing his borrowed knowledge cannot replace real experience. The trees finally give way to a busy fortified town. For Eizo, the crowded streets and stone buildings are his first true glimpse of civilization in this new world. At the gate, a guard questions their purpose. Drawing on years of customer-facing experience from his former life, Eizo puts on a friendly business smile and explains that he has come to sell blacksmith goods. The guard inspects one of the knives and immediately recognizes its quality. Impressed by the craftsmanship, he allows Eizo and Samiya to enter without further trouble. Inside the market, Eizo rents a small stand and pays the required fee. Most of the best spaces are already taken, but he arranges his knives neatly and waits for customers. 2 hours pass without a single sale. Eizo remains crouched behind the untouched display, learning that excellent craftsmanship alone does not guarantee attention in a crowded marketplace. A young man in armor finally stops at the stall and asks to examine a knife. Eizo welcomes the interest even after the customer admits he may only be looking. The armored customer studies the blade and asks the price. Eizo names 5 silver coins, a figure that sounds expensive until the man considers the quality in his hand. After testing the balance and edge, the young man purchases the knife. Eizo accepts the coins with relief, celebrating the first sale of his new life. The successful transaction draws the attention of an experienced merchant. With a practiced grin, the older man approaches and begins evaluating both Eizo and the remaining merchandise. A group of town guards soon gathers around the stall as well. Their interest makes Eizo nervous, but the merchant encourages them to inspect the blades for themselves. One guard tests a knife against tough material and finds the edge exceptionally sharp. The others quickly realize that every weapon on the table has been finished to the same standard. Impressed by the consistency, the merchant offers to purchase the remaining stock in bulk. Azo is shocked by the sudden reversal after spending hours unable to attract a single buyer. The entire batch sells at once, giving Azo enough money to continue working comfortably. The merchant hints that goods of this quality will build a reputation quickly if Azo keeps returning. With business finished, Azo reviews the day's results. He now needs iron, charcoal, food, and other supplies, while Samiya also requires proper clothing and equipment. Samiya is delighted when Azo gives her money for shopping. He tells her to choose what she genuinely needs, rather than continuing to rely on worn and damaged belongings. They divide the errands between them. Samiya heads toward the clothing stalls while Azo searches for raw materials, food, and tools that will support work back at the cabin. After returning to the forest, Azo begins preparing his own supply of charcoal. He uses a newly purchased axe to cut timber and plans to build a proper charcoal burning setup. The enhanced axe bites deeply into the trunk with a single swing. Azo is again surprised by how efficiently his craftsmanship and strengthened body work together. The tree finally crashes to the ground, sending nearby animals fleeing through the brush. Azo surveys the fallen timber and prepares to divide it into usable sections. Azo splits the fallen tree into manageable pieces and begins arranging the wood for charcoal production. Samiya joins him outside, pleased that her body is finally strong enough to help with the heavier work. While Azo continues chopping, Samiya watches his effortless swings with open amusement. The power behind each strike reminds him that his new body is far from ordinary. Azo reflects on the abilities he received and how quickly they are changing his life. He wanted a peaceful existence, yet even simple chores become extraordinary when enhanced strength and perfect craftsmanship are involved. That night, Azo sits quietly outside the cabin until Samiya approaches him. Her hesitant expression makes it clear that she has something important to say. Samiya asks what will happen after her injuries completely heal, and whether Azo intends to leave the forest. He answers that she is free to choose where she lives, but her uncertainty remains. She admits that she has nowhere she truly wants to return to. More importantly, she has grown comfortable sharing meals, work, and conversation with Azo, even though they have known each other only a short time. Understanding what she is trying to say, Azo invites Samiya to remain at the cabin permanently. He promises that she can treat the place as her own home rather than a temporary refuge. Samiya accepts with overwhelming relief and thanks him enthusiastically. Their temporary arrangement officially becomes a shared life in the forest. Samiya praises Azo for giving her a home, while he wonders whether his supposedly slow and solitary life is already changing into something much warmer than he expected. Looking at the cabin, Azo realizes that he now has both a place of his own and someone waiting for him there. He quietly hopes that these peaceful days will continue far into the future. During another visit to town, a young customer becomes fascinated by one of Azo's knives and asks to inspect it more closely. Her intense interest suggests that his work is already attracting attention beyond ordinary shoppers. A new workday begins when Samiya pulls Azo away from the forge after he becomes completely absorbed in his craft. She reminds him that surviving in the forest requires more than endlessly making blades. Azo returns to producing standard knives, heating the metal and shaping the basic form. He deliberately tries to restrain his abilities so the finished goods will not be dangerously excessive. He folds, reheats, and hammers the steel through multiple stages, carefully controlling the carbon and structure of the blade. The detailed process turns raw metal into a durable tool. After shaping the knife, Azo files and sharpens the edge. His support ability makes every step easier, but he still follows the proper process rather than relying on power alone. The completed knife passes another demanding test. Azo notes that even his restrained products would likely be considered high-grade equipment, while anything made with his full ability could reach an entirely different level. Azo finishes a longsword and holds it up with quiet satisfaction. When Samiya returns, he welcomes her home while trying to hide how pleased he is with the new weapon. Samiya notices his good mood and admits that she is happy as well. Their brief exchange shows how naturally the two have begun treating the cabin as a shared home. After bringing down a deer, they carry the carcass back to the workshop. Azo removes the hide while Samiya prepares the meat, turning the successful hunt into food and useful materials. The following morning, they continue processing the deer together. Samiya's practice technique makes the work quick, and the meat is soon divided into manageable portions. Azo is impressed by the clean cuts, though the extreme sharpness of his knife almost becomes a problem. Samiya handles it carefully while shaping the meat into familiar pieces. As they work, Azo reflects on how much unseen labor goes into ordinary food. Sami explains that the remaining bones and organs are returned to the forest, where wolves and other animals will consume them. They cook some of the fresh meat and preserve the rest as dried food. Eizo enjoys his first truly satisfying meal in the new world, and begins dreaming about making smoked meat next. During another workshop session, Samiya helps remove burrs whilst Eizo experiments with a metal mold. Once their accumulated stock is ready, they plan another trip into town. At the town gate, Marius greets Eizo with visible relief and says he had begun to worry after not seeing him for a while. Eizo explains that he may visit regularly and asks about the day's business. Eizo stops by familiar merchants to replenish groceries and discuss future supplies. The growing network of people who recognize him makes the town feel less foreign than before. He learns that some of the goods or people he is looking for are elsewhere, forcing him to adjust his plans. Even so, the visit continues smoothly as he moves between the market stalls. After speaking with a traveling peddler, Eizo begins considering a longer trip with Samiya. The idea would allow them to find new materials and expand the reach of his business. Marius then brings one of Eizo's ordinary swords and asks about obtaining something better. Eizo realizes the guard is interested in the high-class model he deliberately kept out of normal sales. Their conversation draws the attention of a young dwarf, an uncommon sight in the town. She steps forward with the confidence of someone who understands weapons and craftsmanship. The dwarf asks whether Eizo is the blacksmith who made the guard's knives. Once Marius confirms it, she approaches the stall and requests to see his work. Without hesitation, she asks for the finest item Eizo has available. Her confidence convinces him that she may be worthy of seeing the high-class model he refused to display for ordinary customers. Eizo brings out the hidden high-class knife and places it in the dwarf's hands. The moment she examines the finish and balance, her confident expression gives way to genuine astonishment. The young dwarf silently studies every detail of the blade, leaving Eizo and Samiya unsure what she is thinking. Her intense stare makes the quiet moment increasingly uncomfortable. At last, the dwarf thanks Eizo and says she has an important request. She carefully returns the knife before gathering the courage to state it. She suddenly drops to her knees and begs Eizo to accept her as his disciple. The unexpected request leaves him completely stunned. The dwarf introduces herself as Riku Moritz. She explains that she comes from a dwarven smithing family and has been searching for a master capable of teaching her something new. Riku clarifies that Moritz is the name of her smithy rather than a normal family name. Dwarves identify themselves through the workshops and craft lineages to which they belong. She explains that young dwarves traditionally leave their home smithies and travel in search of apprenticeships. Her brothers already found masters, while she has continued wandering alone. According to Riku, a dwarf studies under another workshop, refines new techniques, then eventually returns home with knowledge that can benefit the entire community. Being accepted as an apprentice is considered a great honor. Riku admits that she was close to giving up until she saw Eizo's knives at the market. If he refuses her, she insists she will continue traveling alone until she finds another worthy smithy. Concerned about the danger of a young girl wandering by herself, Eizo finally agrees to accept her. However, he makes it clear that she must follow several conditions if she wants to train under him. His rules include prioritizing safety, never attempting dangerous work alone, helping renovate the cramped cabin, and respecting the household's existing way of life. Riku eagerly agrees to everything. Riku immediately begins calling Eizo master with overwhelming enthusiasm. He protests that such formality is unnecessary, but she refuses to abandon the title. Eizo and Samiya lead their new apprentice back through the forest. When Riku sees the secluded cabin and forge, she is amazed that such a capable craftsman works in such a modest place. Samiya returns from her chores and meets Riku properly. Eizo has both girls wash up before explaining the new apprenticeship and the need to reorganize the house. Because there are not enough bedrooms, Eizo proposes temporary sleeping arrangements until renovations are complete. He even offers up his own room to avoid making either girl uncomfortable. Riku mistakenly assumes that Eizo and Samiya are married, only for both of them to reject the idea in embarrassed unison. Despite denying any romantic relationship, Eizo realizes that the people sharing his home have already become something like a family. Eizo settles the argument by declaring that everyone will divide the rooms fairly until the renovation is finished. As the homeowner, he insists that the final decision is his. The next day, they begin expanding the cabin. Eizo and Riku work on the construction while Samiya hunts, and the combination of dwarven experience and Eizo's enhanced skill pushes the project forward quickly. Samiya returns in high spirits and receives a cheerful welcome from the others. Riku is still adjusting to the beast woman's energy, but the household is already developing a lively rhythm. Riku reacts strangely when she gets a close look at Samiya's tail and ears, having little experience with beast folk. Samiya finds the dwarf's fascination amusing rather than offensive. After processing the game Samiya hunted, Eizo and Riku return to the forge. They pour heated metal into a mold prepared the previous day, giving the apprentice her first serious lesson. Riku learns quickly and handles the basic work with practiced hands. By the afternoon, Eizo allows her to attempt making a knife, while he watches her technique. When Riku asks how he can teach movements that come naturally through his cheat, Eizo has no elegant answer. He tells her to watch every step closely and learn through observation. Riku studies Eizo's hands posture and hammer rhythm without blinking. Her complete concentration shows how seriously she takes the opportunity. After examining the finished work, Riku praises her master's control and says it seems as though he can hear the voice of the iron. She also notices that the longsword she saw earlier was made with even greater power. Eizo shows her a more ordinary blade and asks her to reproduce it. The assignment is meant to reveal what she already understands before he decides how to guide her. Riku begins the task, carefully heating, hammering, and shaping the metal while Eizo observes from nearby. When she finishes, Eizo praises her foundation but points out that she still has room to improve. He promises to demonstrate every step of the process again so she can compare their methods. As he works, Eizo reflects on the unfair difference between his granted knowledge and the years of effort ordinary craftsmen must invest. Riku and other smiths pursue through discipline what he can instinctively understand. Unable to explain every movement in words, Eizo tells Riku to observe the steel itself and comprehend as much as she can. She watches his hammer fall with complete focus. Eizo completes the knife and offers it to Riku for inspection. She reaches toward the freshly finished blade, visibly nervous about judging work produced at such a high level. Riku examines Eizo's finished knife and is overwhelmed by its quality. She declares it magnificent, then doubts that she could reproduce anything remotely similar. Eizo reassures her that she does not need to copy him immediately. Since she is now part of the household, he tells her to learn at her own pace rather than forcing herself. Samiya jokes that Riku could simply take the Tanya family name now that she lives with them. Eizo quickly clarifies that Tanya is only his own surname, not a formal household name. The suggestion still makes Riku wonder whether she would become Riku Tanya. Eizo is caught off guard by how naturally the idea of a shared family name enters the conversation. Samiya protests that using Eizo's surname would be unfair if she were left out. The playful argument grows louder as both girls begin insisting on equal treatment. Eizo realizes that if they truly consider one another family, Samiya and Riku could both use the Tanya name. The idea delights them far more than he expected. Watching the two women celebrate, Eizo reflects that he is still an outsider who arrived from another world. Even so, this strange household has begun giving him a genuine sense of belonging. His thoughts return to the impossible craftsmanship created by his cheat. Eizo understands that such transcendent weapons could influence the wider world if they spread without restraint. With Riku assisting in the forge and Samiya handling hunting and household work, the workshop becomes dramatically more efficient. Their expanded home and clearer division of labor allow production to increase. At the next free market, more customers recognize Eizo's products. He sells additional knives and spears while learning that different grades attract very different buyers and prices. Eizo explains the product range. Affordable ordinary knives for daily use, sharper models for experienced users, and dangerous high-performance items reserved for people who can handle them safely. He quietly acknowledges that the finest tools are products of the cheat granted by the Guardian. Their sharpness and durability are fundamentally beyond normal craftsmanship. The entire stock sells out again. Riku reports that word of mouth is spreading, but the success also means they must restock iron, clay, and other materials immediately. Eizo asks Camilo, the experienced merchant, whether he can secure more raw materials. Camilo agrees and says he is grateful for the profitable business Eizo has already brought him. Camilo carefully calculates the costs and congratulates Eizo on another successful market day. His professionalism convinces Eizo that the merchant is a reliable partner. Because Camilo has contacts throughout the region, Eizo asks him to handle sales of the workshop's weapons and cutlery. Camilo finds the proposal interesting and agrees to discuss the arrangement. Camilo explains that the free market is unreliable and that more customers now seek Eizo's goods after seeing them elsewhere. A stable wholesaler relationship would benefit both men, so they formally agree to work together. They exchange proper introductions. The merchant gives his name as Camilo, while Eizo explains that he lives and works deep within the Black Forest. Camilo is not surprised that a beast woman and a dwarf accompany such a skilled craftsman. They negotiate delivery timing, and Eizo agrees that advance notice of roughly a week will be manageable. Eizo asks Camilo to supply the raw materials needed for each order. Camilo will deduct those costs from the price of the finished goods, simplifying the arrangement for both sides. With the contract settled, Eizo secures a dependable route for materials and sales. Camilo's shop will open the following week, giving the workshop a permanent outlet beyond the free market. When Eizo visits the new store, he is impressed by its size and the variety of goods on display. The shop is clearly designed to serve both ordinary residents and professional travelers. Camilo proudly shows the store's equipment and storage areas before guiding Eizo toward the section prepared for weapons and tools. Eizo checks the knives, short swords and long swords already on sale. Camilo assures him that the stock is performing well and that customers are responding positively. Camilo explains that the store sells to the general public, travelers and professionals alike. He then reveals that a customer has already requested a custom sword made specifically by Eizo. Eizo refuses to accept a blind commission. He asks Camilo to investigate the customer's character and abilities first, insisting that a powerful custom weapon should only go to someone trustworthy. They agree that worthy customers must be capable of reaching the workshop through the dangerous psst. Camilo will provide Eizo's location, only after judging that a requester deserves the opportunity. The agreement means Samiya and Riku can escort approved visitors when necessary. Eizo apologizes for adding more responsibility, but both women accept the role. Camilo leads them into the enormous warehouse behind the shop. Eizo is amazed by the quantity of iron, charcoal, food, and other supplies stored inside. The materials are offered at a surprisingly low wholesale price. Camilo explains that the rate still leaves him a profit, while giving Eizo far better value than the open market. Camilo also throws in additional grass and useful supplies for free, calling it basic courtesy toward a loyal customer. Eizo is stunned by the merchant's generosity. The merchant explains that supporting a promising craftsman is good business. Reliable people who sell excellent goods at reasonable prices are worth investing in for the future. Camilo's first major shipment reaches the workshop, filling the yard with crates of clay, iron, charcoal, and other materials. Eizo accepts the delivery, relieved that production will no longer depend on small market purchases. While discussing how clients might reach the remote workshop, Riku suggests improving the forest path. Samiya suddenly stops them after hearing a warning signal made by a nearby forest wolf. Samiya explains that the wolves are entering their mating season and will soon be raising cubs. Although prey is plentiful, the animals may become more active and territorial around the area. She warns Riku not to leave the house alone. With Eizo and Samiya nearby, the wolves are unlikely to attack, but weaker travelers wandering by themselves could become targets. Samiya adds that wolves are not the only danger. Some forest creatures have developed unusual intelligence, while bandits may also use the wilderness as cover, so constant caution is necessary. The warning reminds everyone that even Samiya once encountered an opponent she could not defeat. Her near-fatal battle with the black bear proves that experience does not make the Black Forest safe. Back in the forge, Eizo begins working through the restocked materials. He retraces his standard process, testing how the newly delivered supplies behave under heat and pressure. The better quality materials immediately produce cleaner results than the ones he used before. Eizo adjusts the furnace and enjoys discovering how much further he can improve his ordinary models. Hammering echoes through the workshop as Eizo and Riku shape another batch of metal. Their coordinated production steadily transforms the raw shipment into finished goods. Once the week's quota is complete, Eizo puts down his tools and asks to see the renovation progress. Riku eagerly leads him toward the expanded section of the cabin. Eizo is astonished to find the roof and major structure already finished. He praises Riku's skill and Samiya's hard work, while both women insist that the result came from everyone's contribution. During the days Eizo focused on orders, Samiya and Riku advanced the construction by themselves. Their beast-folk strength and dwarven building experience made the difficult work surprisingly efficient. They discussed the new layout, including bedrooms, a guest room, and connecting doors. Eizo admits that he has almost no experience living in a proper family home, even from his previous world. With the renovation well underway and the latest orders finished, Eizo announces that the household will take a full day off. Samiya and Riku are surprised because he rarely stops working. Eizo recognizes that his old workaholic habits followed him into this world. Since Camilo's shop is producing steady income, he decides that maintaining a healthy life requires deliberately making time to rest. The family heads to a scenic river for their holiday. Eizo brings simple fishing equipment, hoping to enjoy a peaceful activity far removed from the forge. Sitting beside the water, Eizo realizes that he is finally doing what he always wanted. spending an unhurried day in nature without deadlines or pressure. He assembles homemade fishing rods with line, hooks, and live bait. Samiya and Riku recoil from the worms, leaving Eizo to thread the bait while they complain from a safe distance. The girls remain completely absorbed by how disgusting the bait looks. Eizo can only laugh at the dramatic reaction from two women who regularly butcher game without hesitation. As the fishing begins, Eizo enjoys the pleasant weather and the fair share of food and sleep his new life provides. Even so, he admits that shaking the instinct to work constantly remains difficult. For once, he allows himself to sit quietly and wait. The slow rhythm of the river reminds him how long it has been since he truly relaxed. Samiya suddenly lands the first fish, followed soon by Riku. Their excitement turns the peaceful outing into a friendly competition while Eizo is still waiting for a single bite. The girls compare their catches and continue adding fish to the basket. Eizo's line remains untouched, making his confidence fade with every cheerful announcement. When Eizo finally feels movement, he pulls up nothing but driftwood and leaves. Samiya bluntly suggests that his intimidating face may be scaring the fish away. After eating lunch and resting in the shade, the three return to the river. Eizo insists that the morning results were inconclusive, and that he still has time to recover his pride. The afternoon passes without improvement. As they wait, Samiya explains that hunting customs include burying an animal's heart, rather than treating every part of the body as ordinary meat. She says the heart carries the soul, and must be returned to the forest soil so that life can be born again. The remaining parts are left for wolves and other animals to consume. Eizo quietly wonders what will happen to his own soul someday. As the sun begins to set, he nearly gives up on fishing but decides to make one final attempt. Samiya and Riku have already caught enough fish for everyone, while Eizo still has nothing. Feeling that his dignity as head of the household is at stake, he grips the rod and refuses to quit. At last, the line jerks sharply. Eizo springs to his feet as a real fish finally takes the bait. He fights the struggling catch, forcing himself not to rush and snap the line. With one determined pull, he brings it toward the bank. Eizo finally lands a fish of his own. The family heads home with a respectable catch, closing their rare day off on a cheerful note. The next morning, the household returns to its normal rhythm. Eizo continues forging while Samiya and Riku resume the final stages of the house renovation. Looking over the repaired roof and peaceful workshop, Eizo feels deeply satisfied. Even the small fishing crisis has passed, leaving him convinced that this is the slow life he always wanted. The expansion moves into its next stage. With the main structure complete, everyone takes a short rest before beginning the interior work. Simple windows, doors, mattresses, and bed frames are installed in the new rooms. Samiya and Riku finally receive private bedrooms, while Eizo converts his former sleeping space into a guest room and study. They also begin cultivating land beside the house, hoping to grow vegetables and become more self-sufficient. Eizo plans to ask Camilo for seeds during the next town visit. Riku remarks that Eizo possesses an unusual amount of knowledge. He privately recognizes that his insight comes from both his former world and the information granted when he received a second life. Sleeping in a proper bed reminds Eizo how long he once survived by napping at a work desk. Although his body is young again, the habits of a 40-year-old office worker remain firmly inside him. A noise outside interrupts the quiet evening. Samiya senses that someone has entered the area around the workshop. A heavily armed visitor arrives, loudly announcing that Camilo sent her to commission a sword. Eizo opens the door and prepares to meet the workshop's first custom client. The woman introduces herself as Helen. Her confident manner and traveling gear immediately identify her as an experienced mercenary. Helen confirms that she reached the workshop alone. When asked whether wolves or other creatures attacked her, she casually says she handled the journey without difficulty. She explains that the workshop was hard to locate until she spotted smoke above the trees and followed it. Eizo reminds her that Camilo promised a sword only after he personally assessed what she needed. Helen fights with 2 short swords and wants weapons strong enough for the battlefield. Eizo warns that better steel cannot replace the user's own skill, since survival ultimately depends on how the blades are handled. Examining Helen's current weapons, Eizo finds scratched surfaces and chipped edges from heavy use. He understands that anything he makes may be used to take lives, a responsibility he cannot simply ignore. Helen asks whether he can produce swords better than the ones she carries. Riku suggests that Eizo first test the mercenary properly before accepting the commission. Eizo decides that a sparring match will reveal Helen's true ability. Since even a dwarf recognizes the need for caution, he asks Samiya to serve as her opponent. Helen launches into the test with startling speed, drawing both short blades and crossing the distance almost instantly. Samiya avoids the opening attack by a narrow margin. Watching closely, Azo recognizes Helen's method. One sword controls and restrains the enemy while the other delivers the finishing cut. He asks Samiya to continue so he can judge the style more accurately. Although Azo possesses transferred knowledge of combat, he has never experienced a real battle himself. The spar makes him realize that theoretical understanding and practical pressure are entirely different things. Samiya stops holding back and attacks in earnest. Helen answers immediately, turning the test into a genuine exchange of speed and skill. Their weapons collide repeatedly, as Helen changes angles and Samiya slips around each strike. Azo struggles to follow every movement. Helen moves like a bolt of lightning, but Samiya's instincts allow her to evade and counter. The mercenary realizes that the beast woman is far more dangerous than she first appeared. The atmosphere sharpens when Helen begins using attacks meant to kill. Samiya responds without fear, forcing the mercenary to fight at her absolute limit. Even after the furious exchange, Samiya remains standing. Helen admits that she tried to finish the match within the first few strikes, but could not break through her defense. Helen laughs and apologizes for getting carried away. She hands Azo her damaged thunder swords and says she can remain nearby for the several days needed to complete the commission. She immediately asks for another match after a short break. Azo refuses because he must begin forging her replacement weapons, so Helen settles for watching the work instead. Since the new guest room is ready, Azo allows Helen to stay at the cabin while he works. Samiya and Riku accept the temporary visitor, though the household suddenly feels even more crowded. Helen becomes the workshop's first true custom customer. Her arrival marks a new stage for Azo's business, where clients come directly to the Black Forest seeking weapons made for them alone. After the spar, Azo returns to the forge and begins shaping Helen's swords. Riku handles finishing tasks and burr removal while carefully observing his decisions. Helen proves unexpectedly useful around the workshop and enjoys helping with simple work. Samiya leaves to hunt, giving the mercenary a chance to interact more naturally with Azo and Riku. At dinner, Samiya reports seeing an unbelievably large deer on the way home and promises to watch for it again. The meal becomes livelier now that 4 people are sharing the table. Helen learns that Samiya was once nearly killed by a black bear. Azo warns everyone not to behave recklessly, admitting that he could not bear losing someone in his new family. With the household discussion settled, Azo begins Helen's first custom order in earnest. She leaves to explore the forest for the day, while he and Riku pour their full attention into the twin swords. Azo heats the iron and hammers it into long, uniformly thin blades matching the way Helen fights. His enhanced vision reveals tiny imperfections, allowing him to remove irregularities before they weaken the weapons. He continues shaping, grinding, and tempering the pair, repeatedly checking that both swords match in weight and balance. Riku follows every movement while helping with the simpler stages. A durability test leaves the first blade without a single chip. Azo decides that less successful pieces can still be reworked for household use or sold through Camilo rather than wasted. While polishing the edge, Azo reflects that Helen is not a cruel person despite her dangerous profession. He feels grateful that his new life gives him time to consider the people who will use his work. The first of Helen's 2 short swords is completed. Riku asks to inspect it, and Azo allows her to study the finish while warning her to handle the edge carefully. Riku is unable to find even a single flaw in the polished surface. The precision is far beyond moderate talent, deepening her respect for the master she chose. She apologizes for previously questioning Azo's circumstances and acknowledges the extraordinary power residing in his hands. Azo accepts the apology but remains uneasy about what that power could become. He realizes that by changing the balance between hardness, durability, and sharpness, he could create weapons capable of cutting through stones or surviving impossible punishment. Better materials would push that power even further. The thought frightens him. If his creations became strategic weapons, careless choices could place countless lives in danger, and he would have to bear responsibility for the consequences. Riku notices his silence and worries that she offended him. Azo reassures her, deciding not to fall into despair over disasters that have not happened and to judge every commission carefully. Samiya and Helen return from the forest, carrying medicinal herbs, berries, and other useful plants. Their cheerful arrival pulls Azo away from his dark thoughts. Over the evening meal, they discuss the wolves and other forest dangers. Samiya believes the pack is unlikely to attack the household, so everyone relaxes and enjoys the food. Azo still warns Helen and Samiya to remain careful, especially with Riku nearby. A bear strong enough to threaten Samiya could easily endanger the young apprentice as well. Back in the workshop, Riku's speed improves rapidly, but Azo continues completing work far faster. She recognizes that matching him will require more than ordinary practice. Riku admits that even an entire lifetime may not be enough to catch up with her master. Izo appreciates the praise, though it feels painful, because much of his ability comes from a cheat. At last, Izo presents Helen's completed pair of short swords, naming them the lightning blades. Their matching shape and balance suit her fast, dual-wielding style perfectly. He apologizes for taking longer than planned, and says she can collect them the following day. Helen accepts the delay, understanding that the careful work produced something exceptional. Before the final test, the household shares a dessert made from the raspberries gathered in the forest. Helen is amazed that Izo can turn wild ingredients into something so enjoyable. Riku congratulates her master on completing the commission, while Helen praises both the swords and the meals she enjoyed during her stay. Izo formally confirms that the custom order is complete. Helen thanks everyone involved, and the workshop celebrates the success of its first direct commission. The next day, Helen grips the lightning blades and tests their fit. The handles settle naturally into her hands, and her first swings feel smoother than with any weapon she has used before. She accelerates into a rapid series of cuts, the paired blades moving as extensions of her arms. Izo and the others watch from a safe distance. Helen slices cleanly through the target and stares at the result in disbelief. The swords are sharper, faster, and better balanced than she imagined. Overcome with excitement, Helen throws herself at Izo and hugs him tightly, declaring that asking him to forge the weapons was the right decision. Izo explains that he has already tested their durability and will repair them if any defect appears. He then tells her to pay the price previously arranged through Camilo. Helen finally understands how valuable the swords are and reacts dramatically to the cost. Izo remains calm, accepting the agreed gold and silver without trying to increase the price. The commission ends with a firm handshake. Helen takes possession of the first weapons ever made specifically for her, while Izo accepts his first custom order payment. Afterward, Izo admits that Helen was both extremely strong and extremely loud. Sumia and Riku agree, especially after having to pull the delighted mercenary away from him. The workshop returns to its usual production of knives, swords, and longswords. 2 peaceful days pass before an unexpected problem reaches the household. Izo resumes work beside Riku and Sumia, believing the excitement of the custom order is over. The ordinary rhythm lasts only until someone returns with troubling news. Sumia reports that she encountered the enormous black bear again and escaped before a fight began. Izo is relieved she is unharmed, but immediately asks what they should do next. Izo decides that the black bear must be dealt with before it reaches the cabin. He sets out alone, refusing to let Sumia or Riku risk themselves in the coming fight. Sumia immediately objects and tries to follow him. Izo insists that she remain behind and protect Riku in the workshop if the hunt goes badly. He admits that confronting the bear is not about proving his strength. After finally gaining a family, he cannot ignore a threat that might destroy the home they built together. Armed with one of his finest swords, Izo leaves Sumia and Riku at the cabin and follows the forest trail toward the bear's territory. Broken branches, deep prints, and disturbed vegetation lead him farther into the woods. The signs confirm that an enormous animal recently passed through the area. A heavy scent and sudden rustling reveal the black bear nearby. Izo steadies his breathing as the massive creature emerges from the trees. Facing death again reminds him of the accident that ended his former life. This time, however, he has a healthy body, a weapon of his own making, and people he is determined to protect. The bear advances with terrifying pressure. Izo forces himself to remain calm and raises the sword, knowing hesitation will get him killed. The beast charges and Izo meets it head-on. He slips past the first attack and drives his blade into its thick hide. His strike wounds the bear but fails to stop it. The animal's enormous size and dense muscles absorb far more punishment than he expected. The enraged bear attacks again, forcing Izo into a desperate exchange. His cuts are too shallow, while every swing of its claws threatens to end the fight instantly. A powerful blow sends Izo crashing to the ground. Badly shaken but still conscious, he refuses to die in the forest after finally finding a home worth returning to. The bear rears back and roars, exposing itself for a moment. Izo gathers everything he has into one simple, decisive strike. He compensates for his lack of battle experience with the speed of his enhanced body and the sharpness of his sword. The blade cuts deep enough to finally break the bear's momentum. The enormous animal collapses. Izo cautiously watches for movement and wonders whether the blow truly killed it, remembering Samia's warnings about its resilience. Bruised and exhausted, Izo confirms that the immediate danger has passed. He decides to bring the carcass home, rather than leave valuable meat and materials in the forest. Dragging the giant bear tests even his strengthened body. As he struggles through the trees, he also remembers Samiya's belief that an animal's heart must be returned to the soil. A final twitch from the bear startles him, and Eizo quickly delivers another blow to ensure it cannot rise again. Samiya suddenly appears and throws herself onto Eizo. After checking that the bear is dead, she clings to him with relief and anger. The fear she had been suppressing finally breaks through. Samiya cries openly, overwhelmed by the thought that Eizo might not have returned. Eizo holds her while she struggles to calm down. The reunion makes the cost of his reckless decision far more real than the wounds on his body. Riku soon reaches them as well. Scolding her master through tears, Eizo realizes that neither woman could simply wait at home while someone they loved faced death alone. Samiya thanks him for surviving and presses close, giving him a tender sign of affection. Eizo can only accept the moment while Riku watches in emotional silence. After everyone returns home, they process the bear together and share a late meal. Eizo's injuries ache, but the familiar voices around the table assure him that he truly made it back. The following day, Samiya admits that when the bear appeared, she was terrified she would never get the chance to tell Eizo how important he had become to her. Her words leave Eizo speechless, and she embraces him again before embarrassment can make her retreat. As night settles over the cabin, the household quietly welcomes Eizo home. The warmth of the simple room feels more valuable than any victory over the bear. Eizo wakes after sleeping deeply and finds Samiya already nearby. He complains that his body feels as though he was beaten with a log, but he is able to sit up and eat. Samiya and Riku awkwardly offer to help clean and tend his bruised body. Their embarrassment quickly turns the serious offer into a chaotic argument. Once Eizo recovers, another ordinary day begins. The forge, hunting, meals, and household chores return, making the deadly encounter feel almost unreal. Seeking a quiet moment, Eizo goes to the river and bathes beneath the open sky. The cool water helps ease the stiffness left by the battle. When he returns, he finds Samiya and Riku drenched by sudden rain, their soaked clothes clinging uncomfortably. The harmless sight catches him completely off guard. Still covered in grime after the fight, Eizo suggests that Samiya and Riku take a proper bath. Samiya invites Riku to join her, while Eizo decides to clean himself separately so everyone can finally relax. Riku steps into the hot water and immediately understands why Samiya enjoys it so much. The warmth loosens the exhaustion in her body, and the two women settle into the bath together. Samiya explains that tiger beast folk do not dislike water, though they rarely submerge themselves completely while hunting because it can dull their scent. Riku notices how different Samiya's hair and markings look when soaked. Riku admits that the workshop leaves her hot and sweaty every day, so she has wanted to bathe for a long time. She thanks Samiya for bringing her and is warmly told that she can come again whenever she wishes. As Samiya helps wash her, Riku remembers caring for the younger children in her large family. The quiet exchange makes the bath feel less like an unfamiliar luxury and more like time spent with family. The two finish washing and return looking completely refreshed. Eizo welcomes them back, immediately noticing how much lighter and more relaxed they seem after the bath. Because the evening air is cool, everyone gathers near the campfire to warm up. Samiya and Riku insist they are comfortable, still carrying the heat of the bath with them. While grooming themselves, Samiya and Riku compare the way beast folk and dwarves hold everyday tools. Their small differences become another source of playful curiosity rather than awkwardness. Riku patiently demonstrates how to hold the utensil between the thumb and index finger. Eizo notices that, having grown up in a large family, she is naturally good at teaching others without making them feel embarrassed. The lesson continues into dinner preparation. Eizo reflects that there is still plenty he can learn about family life from the two women, then serves the soup they have made together. After tasting the soup, Samiya enthusiastically declares that it is even better than usual. Eizo laughs that hunger always improves a meal, though the others insist his cooking is genuinely delicious. The evening ends with everyone eating together in easy silence. For Eizo, the ordinary meal becomes another calm and precious moment with the family that has formed around his forge. A new chapter begins with Marius giving his sister a letter. He tells her to find Camilo, who knows the location of a blacksmith hidden deep in the Black Forest and can guide her to safety. Back in town, Eizo delivers another batch of goods to Camilo and asks about Marius. The young guard returned to the capital some time ago and has not been seen since, leaving Eizo increasingly uneasy. Eizo explains that Marius helped him when he was first establishing himself, so he wants to repay that kindness. Camilo warns that powerful nobles in the capital are preparing for conflict and advises Eizo not to investigate recklessly. Before Eizo's group can enter town, the sound of a violent struggle reaches them from nearby. The disturbance is too close and too serious to ignore. Samiya identifies the attackers as bandits. Rather than continue toward the gate, Eizo decides that they need to find out exactly what is happening. Eizo rushes toward the fight while telling Samiya and Riku to follow as quickly as they safely can. He warns them not to take unnecessary risks as he charges ahead alone. Reaching the attackers, Eizo catches one bandit from behind and demands to know what they are doing. His sudden intervention turns the ambush against them. The confrontation erupts into close combat. Eizo draws his blade and cuts through the bandits before they can reorganize around their intended victim. One attacker tries to press the assault, but Eizo intercepts the strike and shields the young woman. His arrival gives her the first chance to escape the surrounding blades. With the last nearby bandits defeated, Eizo checks the battlefield and turns to the noble-looking young woman they attacked. She is alive, though clearly shaken by what almost happened. Eizo asks who she is and why so many armed men were pursuing her, explaining that the town guards will demand the same answers. As he studies her face, he feels that she resembles someone he knows. The woman introduces herself as Diana Imel, a noble from the capital who came here seeking refuge under difficult circumstances. She sincerely thanks Eizo and the others for saving her life. Diana admits that the attackers would certainly have killed her if Eizo had not intervened. Hearing that she came from the capital, Eizo wonders whether her situation is connected to the political conflict Camilo mentioned. Diana agrees that remaining near the road would be dangerous. Since the surviving conspirators have already been delayed, she asks Eizo to take her to the secluded person she originally came to find. Eizo decides to bring Diana home before more enemies appear. He asks Samiya to help support her while Riku prepares the cabin and gets a fire started. As Eizo treats Diana's injuries, he finally sees what his weapons are truly used for outside the forge. Rather than regret making them, he resolves to use his craft and strength to protect his family. Diana notices Eizo's expression and asks whether he was injured. He assures her that he is unharmed, though the attack has forced him to think more seriously about the danger surrounding them. On the way back, Eizo asks about the mysterious person Diana was searching for. She explains that her brother recently began living in a remote area and told her about a highly skilled blacksmith there. When Diana names her brother as Marius Albert Imul, Eizo's suspicion is confirmed. The young noble is the same guard who helped him in town and became one of his earliest acquaintances. Eizo realizes that Marius must have intended Diana to find him. Diana, in turn, understands that the secluded blacksmith her brother trusted is standing right in front of her. Diana reveals that Marius gave her a letter addressed to Camilo, expecting the merchant to introduce them. Too stubborn to wait for guidance, she tried to cross the forest alone and walked directly into the ambush. Once everyone reaches the cabin, Eizo introduces his household. Diana meets Samiya, the tiger beast woman, and Riku, the dwarf who works beside him at the forge. Eizo expects the guards to investigate the road soon, so he plans to return to town and gather information. Until then, he tells Diana that she will remain safely under his care. With no pursuers encountered on the way home, Diana is shown to the small guest space and allowed to put away her belongings. Eizo insists that explanations can wait until everyone has eaten. Diana joins the household at the table and cautiously begins the meal. The simple food is a striking contrast to the fear and exhaustion of her escape. After the first few bites, Diana's restraint disappears. Her expression makes it obvious that she finds Eizo's cooking far better than she expected. Embarrassed, Diana admits that she has eaten nothing since breakfast. Eizo tells her not to worry and asks her to stop addressing him so formally, adding that warm food matters most during the worst moments. Diana thanks everyone for accepting a stranger into their home, despite the trouble following her. Watching her finally relax over the meal, Eizo feels reassured that bringing her here was the right choice. Once dinner is over, Eizo gently asks Diana to explain the circumstances behind the attack. She agrees, knowing that everyone who is sheltering her deserves to understand the danger. Diana explains that Count Imel governs the northeastern territory that includes Camilo's town. The family consists of the eldest son Leon, the second son Carol, the third son Marius, and Diana herself. When monsters appeared in the region, the Count and his heir Leon led their private army to subjugate them. The entire force was destroyed, and Marius hurried to the capital after receiving the disastrous news. The official story blamed powerful monsters, but the bodies carried clean cutting wounds rather than injuries from claws, fangs, or horns. That evidence suggests that human attackers arranged the massacre, with Carol benefiting most from it. Carel is an illegitimate son, while Marius was born to the Count's lawful wife and therefore holds the stronger claim to inheritance. Their mother still raised Carel with the same affection as her other children. Diana knew nothing about the conspiracy until the deaths occurred. Because the territory cannot remain without a recognized successor, the family must resolve the inheritance quickly, or risk losing its rank and authority. The conspirators next targeted Diana, removing another person who could support Marius's claim. After reading Marius's letter and surviving the ambush, she decides to place herself under Eizo's protection for the time being. Eizo tells Diana to ask Samiya or Riku whenever she needs help. The two women welcome her warmly, but also request that she stop speaking to them with stiff noble formality so they can live together more naturally. Diana is surprised by the request, then agrees to speak casually while she stays with them. Her acceptance breaks down the first barrier between the noblewoman and Eizo's unconventional household. From the following day, daily life changes only slightly. Diana joins the morning routine while Eizo, Samiya, and Riku return to the work that keeps the forge running. Rather than remain idle, Diana begins helping around the workshop. Eizo leaves her in Samiya's care so she can learn the household's tasks without disrupting the dangerous smithing work. Although she was raised as a noble lady, Diana is physically strong and clearly trained with a sword. Eizo remembers seeing her fight and realizes that she is far more capable than her refined appearance suggests. Diana examines one of Eizo's high-class longswords, while Riku notes that the handle is not yet finished. Even incomplete, the weapon immediately captures Diana's attention. Diana says that even the capital has few smiths capable of producing a blade of this quality. Eizo tries to downplay it as the work of a merely decent craftsman, hoping to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Unable to contain her excitement, Diana asks Eizo to spar with her. Her reaction reveals that beneath her noble manners, she is every bit as obsessed with combat as Helen. Eizo agrees to one match before nightfall, partly because there is little else to do, and partly because he wants to evaluate her ability. Diana eagerly accepts and prepares herself. As they take their positions, Diana remarks that Eizo does not look especially powerful at first glance. The comment only makes him more curious about how seriously she intends to fight. The duel begins without ceremony. Diana closes the distance and tests Eizo with a swift opening attack. Their blades meet in a rapid series of exchanges. Diana's movements are sharp and controlled, showing that her training is practical rather than decorative. Eizo begins taking the match more seriously. Diana is not on Helen's extraordinary level, but she understands timing, distance, and how to handle a sword under pressure. Eizo finally breaks through Diana's defense and stops his blade before it can injure her. The clean finish makes the difference between their skill levels undeniable. Diana collapses in exhaustion and complains that Eizo forced her to move far beyond her limits. He points out that they were not fighting to the death and praises her for performing well despite the loss. Diana admits that, even after countless matches against Marius, she has defeated him only once. Her ambition is to keep improving until she earns recognition as a truly formidable swordswoman. Diana learns that Helen is also known as the Lightning Blade. Eizo explains that Helen once kept fighting with a badly damaged weapon, proof that her extraordinary technique mattered more than the quality of her sword. Hearing how powerful Helen truly is, Diana becomes even more eager to meet her. Eizo warns that Helen can dismantle an ordinary opponent in moments, though Diana only takes that as motivation to improve. The next training session begins with a familiar command. Diana eagerly asks Eizo to make her his disciple, turning their casual sparring into a more serious daily routine. Eizo remembers how deeply Marius respected his craftsmanship and realizes that helping Diana is another way to repay him. He agrees to train her, though he insists that she obey his instructions and rest properly. Diana promises to listen, but Samiya and Riku immediately ask to join the lessons as well. Eizo accepts, provided everyone stops before exhaustion or injury makes the training dangerous. From that day onward, sword practice becomes part of the household schedule. After the morning chores are finished, Eizo gives all three women structured lessons in stance, movement, and control. With proper instruction, Diana's movements quickly become sharper and more efficient. Eizo concludes that her remaining limitation is the weapon itself, since her old sword can no longer keep pace with her growing skill. Eizo decides to forge Diana a sword that matches her strength and fighting style. She is delighted by the promise, while he quietly begins considering the balance and durability she will need. The next morning, Diana throws herself into running and conditioning around the forest. Her determination is obvious, even if her body has not yet adapted to Eizo's demanding routine. Diana returns completely exhausted and admits that the training is harder than she expected. Eizo welcomes her back and reminds her that rest is part of becoming stronger, not a sign of failure. After catching her breath, Diana joins the others for the day's work. Samiya reports that fresh game has been found, giving them both food and another opportunity to practice moving through the forest. Everyone gathers outside for a simple meal made from the day's catch. Diana watches how naturally the household shares the work, from hunting and preparation to cooking and cleanup. Azo reflects that every part of their life depends on the forest. The animals they hunt, the water they drink, and the firewood they burn all allow the family to continue living far from town. He tells the others that taking a life for food should never be treated casually. Their survival is possible only because the forest provides for them, so gratitude must accompany every meal. The household prepares the meat together, carefully cleaning and cooking it instead of wasting anything. Diana follows their example and learns that life in the forest carries responsibilities as well as freedom. Once the food is ready, everyone thanks the animal and shares the meal. The lively table turns another ordinary dinner into a warm family gathering. At House Imel, Karel receives troubling news while Marius watches from the side. The failed attempt to eliminate Diana has made the succession struggle impossible to ignore. Carol learns that the hired attackers did not complete their mission and that Diana's whereabouts remain unknown. Although the failure infuriates him, he understands that he can no longer rely on the same plan. Rumors are already spreading around the capital, and the longer the uncertainty continues, the more dangerous Karel's position becomes. He decides that he must take direct action before Marius can strengthen his own claim. A messenger quietly leaves the noble estate carrying new orders. The struggle for House Amel is now moving beyond private suspicion and into an open contest of information and force. Several days after Diana arrived, Azo and Camilo finalize a cautious plan. Camilo already anticipated the political danger and had arranged contacts who could help Azo enter the capital without drawing attention. Azo returns home carrying a letter that confirms the next step. The message gives him a route and a person to meet, making it possible to reach Marius despite the surveillance around House Imel. The group prepares for Azo's departure the following morning. Riku and Samiya discuss who should accompany him and who must remain behind to protect Diana and the forge. Azo assures everyone that he has reliable help and will not act recklessly. Diana apologizes for bringing such danger to the household, but he reminds her that protecting family is never a burden. Using Camilo's instructions, Azo approaches the capital by a less obvious route. He keeps the letter hidden and avoids the main flow of travelers as he nears the guarded district. A local peddler shows Azo a narrow passage known mostly to merchants. The path is not truly secret, but its awkward location makes it useful for someone who wants to avoid unnecessary attention. At a small checkpoint, the guard eyes Azo suspiciously and asks what he is carrying. Azo presents himself as an ordinary craftsman and offers a few trade goods to make the inspection less troublesome. The guard studies him long enough to make Azo sweat, but the disguise and papers hold. He keeps his expression calm while waiting for permission to continue. The inspection turns unexpectedly casual when the guard jokes about Azo's heavy luggage. After a brief exchange, he waves Azo through without discovering the real purpose of his visit. Inside the capital, Azo is led to a private smithy where Marius is waiting. The young noble welcomes him quickly, aware that there is little time for a long reunion. Marius asks Azo to forge a sword for him. He does not want an ordinary weapon, but a blade that can represent House Amel when he challenges Karel's claim. The plan is to expose the crimes surrounding the Count's death, remove Karel from succession, and establish Marius as the rightful next Count. A convincing family symbol will strengthen the public declaration. Marius admits that the scheme may look theatrical, but he is acting for the future of the territory and its people. Because he cannot return to the forest, he places the crucial task in Azo's hands. Azo accepts the commission to create a new heirloom sword for House Amel. The request carries far more weight than an ordinary order, since the weapon must embody the authority of the entire family. Marius explains that the original family sword was said to have been blessed by the king and carried by House Imel's founder. Its disappearance left them without a clear symbol of legitimacy. Old records also mention a mysterious blacksmith connected to the blade, and Marius suspects that Azo's craftsmanship can recreate that lost prestige. After considering the risk, Azo formally accepts. Marius asks Azo to stop treating him with excessive politeness while they work together. He wants the blacksmith who helped him before, not a nervous subordinate speaking to a noble. They arrange for Azo to stay near the private workshop and keep his presence hidden. Marius will handle the guards and provide materials while Azo concentrates entirely on the sword. Azo compares surviving descriptions of the old heirloom with the weapons currently used by House Amel. Rather than create a perfect copy, he plans a blade that looks traditional while performing like a modern high-class sword. With the design settled, Azo begins preparing the forge. Every measurement must serve both practical combat and the illusion that the weapon has belonged to the family for generations. He selects alibite and other carefully chosen materials for the blade. Marius watches closely, knowing that the appearance of an heirloom will mean nothing if the sword itself is weak. The bellows roar as Azo raises the forge to the required heat. He works the metal gradually, refusing to rush the foundation of a weapon that may decide the fate of House Amel. Azo chooses the best portion of the prepared iron plate and begins shaping it. His enhanced skill guides the heating and hammering, but he still treats every strike as deliberate craftsmanship. Because this is a custom model, Azo concentrates more intensely than usual. Small differences in thickness, curve, and balance will determine whether the finished sword feels like a true noble weapon. After forging and grinding the blade, Azo tempers and straightens it. The metal survives the process, but an unexpected flaw forces him to pause and reconsider the finishing work. Back in the Black Forest, the women continue waiting for Azo's return. Samia, Riku, and Diana keep the workshop and household running, though his absence is felt in every routine. Diana worries that Azo may be risking himself because of her family's problems. The others reassure her that he chose to help willingly, and that their master is far more capable than she realizes. Riku admits that she does not fully understand human politics, but she understands. To her, protecting Diana and helping Marius are simply extensions of the bond Azo has built with everyone around him. At the capital workshop, an elderly smith studies Azo's work and notices something unusual in the way he handles the metal. Azo wonders whether the man's experience allows him to sense the strange factor behind his craftsmanship. The old smith asks to examine Azo's personal knife. After testing the edge, he is astonished by its sharpness and realizes that Azo's ordinary-looking tools are anything but ordinary. To prove the point, the smith slices through a bundle of wood with the knife. The clean cut shows that even Azo's everyday equipment exceeds the standards of many professional weapons. The old man finally understands why Marius trusts Azo so completely. These are not decorative curiosities or exaggerated rumors, but genuine products capable of performing exactly as claimed. Azo creates 2 prototype pieces using slightly different methods. Both reach high-class quality, giving him a practical way to compare which construction will best suit the false heirloom. Studying the prototypes, Azo asks what truly separates one from the other. He wants the final sword to shine because of its structure and balance, not merely because his gift forces quality into the metal. He begins the final blade by cutting the prepared metal into sections, stacking the billets, and wrapping them securely. The layered construction will give him greater control over strength and appearance. Azo heats the stacked metal until it becomes workable, then folds it over itself. Each cycle must be hot enough to bind the layers without ruining the steel. He repeats the heating, folding and hammering again and again. The process refines the material while leaving subtle patterns that will help the sword look worthy of an old noble house. When the core is complete, Azo shapes the blade and begins adding details connected to House Amel's history. The weapon must feel personal to Marius, not like a generic sword decorated at the last moment. Azo recognizes that he is deliberately creating a false heirloom, but he refuses to make a cheap imitation. If the sword helps Marius protect his territory, it may eventually become a genuine family treasure through its own history. The finished blade is decorated and treated so that it resembles a weapon preserved across generations. Azo takes care not to make the aging so obvious that knowledgeable nobles will immediately suspect a forgery. He applies a controlled stain, using an old technique involving eggs to give the fittings a naturally aged appearance. The effect is subtle enough to suggest long use rather than careless damage. After a long night of work, the heirloom-style sword is finally complete. Its ornate design suits a noble house, while the blade beneath the decoration remains a serious weapon. The elderly smith tests the finished sword with several controlled swings. Its balance and response surprise him, confirming that Azo succeeded in combining ceremonial presence with battlefield performance. The old smith praises it as the finest weapon he has handled in years. Azo is satisfied that the sword can stand as a proper Amel heirloom and support Marius when he makes his claim. With the false heirloom finished, Marius thanks Azo and tells him to rest until the morning delivery. Azo cannot help wondering whether the political plan will succeed and whether Marius will be able to return Diana safely afterward. At House Imel, Corel appears before the assembled nobles as the succession ceremony begins. Marius watches in silence, waiting for the moment when their prepared evidence can be revealed. Marius interrupts with news that the true family heirloom has been recovered. He claims the sword was stolen during the confusion surrounding the Count's death, and presents it before Duke Menzel, and the gathered witnesses. The announcement immediately undermines Carell's position. Since possession of the heirloom supports the legitimate head of House Amel, the nobles turn their attention toward Marius and demand an explanation. Marius displays Azo's sword and declares it to be the genuine Amel heirloom. The workmanship and aged fittings are convincing enough to silence the room for a moment. Carell protests that the claim is impossible and asks how anyone can prove which weapon is real. Marius remains calm, prepared for exactly that challenge. A letter left by the late Count explains that the sword used during public ceremonies was only a replica. In times of crisis, the true heirloom was to be stored elsewhere, so the family symbol could survive. The records also reveal that Carell's branch possessed the ceremonial copy and tried to pass it off as the original. The older nobles recognize the trap, while Azo struggles not to react to Marius's theatrical confidence. A servant confirms that she saw suspicious movements around Carell after the Count's death. Duke Menzel decides that the testimony and recovered sword must be reported directly to the crown. Karl insists that the presented weapon is still a forgery, but Marius argues that its design matches the oldest surviving descriptions. The assembled nobles begin accepting the story behind the hidden heirloom. Duke Menzel proposes settling the question with a practical test in the palace garden. If the sword truly represents House Amel, it should withstand a demonstration against an ordinary military blade. In the garden, a common sword is brought forward and held ready. Marius takes the supposed heirloom while the spectators gather at a safe distance. Marius raises the Amel sword and strikes without hesitation. The opposing blade meets it directly, giving everyone a clear comparison rather than a ceremonial display. The ordinary sword breaks under the impact, while the heirloom remains undamaged. The clean result shocks the witnesses and gives Marius the proof he needed. Marius explains that the sword's strength is consistent with the legendary weapon described in the family records. Even Duke Menzel can no longer dismiss it as a convenient imitation. With Carell's claim collapsing, the inheritance dispute is effectively settled in Marius's favor. Azo is told that his part is finished and that he can finally step away from the noble struggle. Before the gathering can disperse, a concealed attacker suddenly lunges toward Marius. The motions is fast enough to surprise the nobles, but Marius reacts with the new sword already in hand. Marius clashes with the cloaked assailant and drives him back. The heirloom's balance allows him to meet the ambush cleanly, instead of being overwhelmed at close range. Duke Menzel praises Marius for defending himself and orders the attacker seized for punishment. The incident also demonstrates that the sword is not merely a political prop, but a weapon Marius can genuinely trust. With the assassin restrained, Marius returns inside to finish the succession proceedings. The danger surrounding House Amel has not vanished, but its leadership is no longer uncertain. Standing alone afterward, Marius reflects on everything the conflict cost his family. Winning the title brings little satisfaction, yet he accepts the responsibility because the territory still needs someone to lead it. The succession is formally concluded, and Marius becomes the new head of House Amel. He begins reviewing the future policies of the territory, while the consequences of Carell's actions are investigated. News of Carell's death and the failed conspiracy spreads publicly. His body is handled without ceremony, and rumors about the hidden heirloom circulate throughout the capital. Azo returns to Camilo's shop, where the merchant greets him with obvious relief. Word of the successful succession has already reached town, and everyone is eager to hear what happened. Camilo praises Azo for completing the dangerous commission and thanks him for helping Marius. Azo, in turn, acknowledges that the merchant's contacts and planning made the entire operation possible. Marius joins them briefly and asks whether Azo wants anything in return. Azo has little interest in noble rewards, but he remembers a material that would be difficult for an ordinary blacksmith to obtain. Azo requests information about rare ore rather than money or status. Camilo agrees to search his trade network and promises to contact him whenever something suitable appears. After finishing their remaining business, Azo leaves the capital behind. His only concern now is reaching the Black Forest and letting the family know that he is safe. As Azo approaches the cabin, voices and movement appear among the trees. Samia and the others have noticed him returning and hurry out to meet him. The entire household welcomes Azo back with visible relief. Their excited reactions make the quiet forest home feel warmer than any reward he could have received in the capital. Azo steps inside and finally allows himself to relax. After days of secrecy, noble politics, and unfamiliar streets, he is home again among the people he trusts. Diana watches him closely, searching his expression for news about her brothers. Azo's silence makes her anxious until he begins explaining the outcome. Diana remembers that Carell was kind when they were children, and often played with her and the others. The knowledge that he caused so much suffering is difficult for her to accept. Azo explains that the new Imel heirloom was also the sword that ended Karel's threat. For Diana, the weapon now carries both the survival of her family and the death of her brother. Seeing her distress, Azo tells Diana not to blame herself for the choices Karel made. She has already endured enough and is allowed to mourn without carrying responsibility for his crimes. Azo announces that they will travel to town the next morning for a celebratory feast. The trip will require 2 or 3 days away, prompting Riku and Samiya to begin preparing supplies. The household rides toward the capital in a carriage, with Diana returning under far safer circumstances than when she fled. The growing city appears ahead as they approach the noble district. They arrive at the palace and are escorted through its grand halls. Azo feels conspicuously out of place among the elaborate decorations and formally dressed guests. The celebration draws people of many races and regions, including visitors Azo has never seen before. Marius explains that the capital uses the occasion to display the unity and influence of House Amel. Azo notices elves among the guests and apologizes for staring, since they are rarely seen near the Black Forest. Marius looks exhausted from the endless ceremonies and administrative work that followed his succession. Before the main feast, Azo finds Diana waiting in the palace garden. She has already changed into formal clothing, but still seems more interested in testing her swordsmanship than attending noble functions. Diana asks whether they can spar one more time before the ceremony begins. Azo agrees, curious to see how much her continuous training has improved. They take their positions in the garden and begin the match. Diana attacks with greater confidence, no longer wasting movement on unnecessary flourishes. The duel accelerates as Diana presses Azo with a rapid combination. He blocks and redirects each strike, forcing her to adjust instead of relying on memorized patterns. Azo tells Diana that her skill has advanced remarkably in only a few weeks. If she continues training and learns to control mana more consistently, she may grow as powerful as she wishes. Diana happily thanks him for the praise. Their match ends just as word arrives that Marius has been formally accepted as the new Count Imel. The hastily prepared feast begins in the palace hall. Guests raise their glasses to Marius, the future of the territory, and the changes expected under his rule. Diana appears in an elaborate red dress, reflecting the rose motif associated with House Amel. Azo is surprised by how different she looks from the sword-wielding woman who trains in his yard. Azo offers an awkward compliment, telling Diana that the dress suits her. She immediately accuses him of flattering her, though her embarrassed reaction shows that the words pleased her. After the feast, Azo finally gets a quiet chance to speak with Diana. Their departure is approaching, and both understand that her future can no longer remain undecided. Marius confirms that the false heirloom plan is complete, and no longer needs Azo's involvement. He asks Azo to leave the political work to House Amel, while continuing to care for the people important to him. Before parting, Marius asks Azo to look after Diana and the territory connected to the Black Forest. Azo accepts, promising to help whenever the need falls within his reach. At the edge of the estate, a servant gives Azo a sealed box and reminds him not to forget the lake gauge requested earlier. The unexpected package is said to contain something Marius wants him to take home. Diana tries to sit on the heavy box during the return trip, only to be stopped immediately. Azo suspects that whatever is inside is far more important than ordinary luggage. When the container is opened, a young woman unexpectedly reveals herself and announces that she is coming with them. The household is stunned by the sudden addition to their journey. A letter explains that the young woman needs Azo's protection and asks him to accept responsibility for her. The request is presented so directly that refusing would create another political complication. Since Marius has become Count, the circumstances around the girl have changed and she can no longer remain where she was. Azo decides that bringing her to the forest is safer than leaving her exposed in the capital. Azo agrees to take the newcomer home. She thanks him enthusiastically, relieved that she will not be abandoned after the arrangements surrounding her collapsed. During the journey, the young woman introduces herself more fully and calls Diana by a familiar title. Azo realizes that her connection to House Amel is closer than the letter initially suggested. Diana explains that stubborn nobles had been issuing orders around the girl's future without considering her wishes. Azo tells her that they can discuss everything after she has seen their home and calmed down. As the cabin comes into view, Diana happily announces that they have arrived. Azo reminds the newcomer that she will be treated as part of the household rather than as a noble guest. Azo opens the door and welcomes Diana back to the Black Forest. Her joyful answer makes it clear that the cabin has become home to her, not merely a hiding place. The family reacts with surprise when they meet the new arrival. After a confused exchange, Riku explains that bringing in another person is practically becoming a tradition at Eizo's workshop. Because the cabin is already crowded, everyone spends about a week constructing an additional room beside the workshop. The expansion gives the newest family a proper place to live without disrupting the forge. The new room is completed, and the whole household celebrates another job finished together. Eizo thanks everyone for their help, while the newcomer promises to care for the space as a true member of the family. Eizo gives the newcomer a custom knife like the ones carried by the others. He explains that every member of the household keeps one for self-defense, making the gift both practical and symbolic. She understands that the knife represents her place in the family and promises to handle it carefully. Afterward, everyone carries Diana's luggage into the completed room and prepares for the next day's errands. With the room ready, Eizo suggests buying Diana a proper bed in town. The family also plans to sell goods, eat dinner, and finish several other purchases while they are there. At Camilo's shop, the merchant warmly greets Eizo and jokes about being visited by so many of its attractive companions. He reports that the increased workforce and regular supply of goods have made his business more profitable. Camilo says he has expanded by opening a small branch in the territory now governed by Count Marius. He also mentions new intelligence from northern traders about an unusual shipment. The rumored material is Hihirokane, a legendary light metal said to be found only in the north. Eizo immediately asks Camilo to obtain some if his network can locate a reliable source. After completing their sale, Camilo thanks Eizo and Riku for providing enough stock to satisfy customers without running out. He is also relieved to hear that the capital crisis ended safely. The newcomers marvel at how lively the town feels, though Eizo finds it modest compared with the capital. He reflects that without his unusual advantages, he might have ended up as an ordinary wandering blacksmith like the adventurers around them. When someone asks whether Eizo plans to set out on another journey, he firmly says no. His travels were forced by circumstances, not a desire to roam the world. Samiya and the others admit that they worry Eizo might vanish without warning. His past departures were dangerous enough that the possibility still frightens them. Eizo assures them that things are different now. He will never leave again without telling his family exactly where he is going and why. Back in the forest, Samiya detects the smell of approaching rain on the wind. She estimates that the storm will last only a few days rather than an entire week. The rain begins around midnight, exactly as Samiya predicted. Since outdoor work is impossible, Eizo and Riku spend the day replenishing sheet metal from their stored iron ore. The others are impressed that the forge produces its own sheet metal. Eizo points out that dwarves were naturally stronger than humans from the beginning, making Riku's work look deceptively effortless. Eizo decides that everyone should make general goods during the rain, while he forges a replacement knife for himself. His current knife was heavily used during the capital operation, and deserves to be retired. The family watches Eizo work and praises the beauty of his precise movements. Even those who understand little about smithing can tell that he is concentrating more seriously than usual. Eizo admits that the same experiment would have been difficult in the capital. Here he can freely mix materials, adjust the heat, and test his ideas without outsiders watching every step. The result proves that he can continue making swords in the forest without changing his methods. Since he has no intention of moving elsewhere, the limitation does not trouble him. The rain continues for several days while the household experiments with new products indoors. Eizo knows the quiet period cannot last forever, but for now it gives everyone valuable time to work. When the sky finally clears, Samiya celebrates the chance to hunt again, while the others rush to dry laundry before it can grow mold. Her cheerful energy immediately restores the household's usual rhythm. Eizo guesses that Samiya is especially happy because the rain has replenished the forest and strengthened familiar scents. Her excitement resembles a maiden's fluttering heart, amusing everyone around her. A rapid series of hammer strikes rings through the workshop with an almost musical rhythm. The unusual sound makes Eizo pause and wonder who is working so confidently nearby. After lunch, Eizo thanks the others for the food and asks Riku whether she ever wants to spend time outside the forge. Apart from trips to town and bathing, she is almost always working. Riku answers that watching and helping a mastersmith is enjoyable enough for her. Eizo accepts her decision, relieved that she is not forcing herself merely out of obligation. A familiar presence approaches the cabin through the forest. Eizo recognizes the sound before the visitor even reaches the door. The visitor calls Eizo's name from outside, and he hurries to open entrance. The energetic voice belongs to someone the household has not seen in a long time. Helen, the lightning blade, greets Azo with her usual confidence. He welcomes her inside, pleased to see that she returned safely from her latest work. Helen asks Azo to inspect her damaged sword, and jokes that he always understands what a weapon needs. He examines the chips, bends, and stress marks before agreeing to repair it. The blade has suffered serious wear, but Helen says it has saved her life many times. Azo confirms that it can be restored, though the damage shows how violently she has been fighting. Helen thanks him and leaves the weapon in his hands without hesitation. For Azo, restoring a trusted tool is simply part of his responsibility as the smith who made it. While Azo begins the repair, Helen speaks proudly of the blade's performance. She insists that no other weapon has served her nearly as well. Azo carefully straightens the damaged sections and corrects the blade's balance. Helen watches the work quietly, knowing that careless repair would ruin the sword she depends on. Once the restoration is finished, Helen tests the weapon and declares that it feels as good as the day she first received it. Azo explains that he merely corrected the accumulated problems. Helen asks whether she can watch him work on another weapon. Azo agrees and invites her to remain in the workshop as long as she does not interfere with the dangerous tools. During their conversation, Helen reveals that her father made harnesses and saddles, so she grew up watching craftsmanship. She left home for personal reasons, but still remembers the skills and discipline she learned there. Azo listens without pressing her about painful details. When the rest of the family returns, Helen is introduced more fully and welcomed to the table. Diana is shocked to learn that the casual visitor is the legendary lightning blade. Helen, meanwhile, suggests that Diana repair one weapon while she handles another. Helen takes charge of the maintenance lesson and tells Diana to leave the difficult portion to her. Once the repair is arranged, she proposes testing their skills outside. The household watches Helen train, impressed by how hard and efficiently she moves. Even routine exercises reveal the experience of someone who has survived countless real battles. Helen evaluates Diana's swordsmanship and notes that her basic movements are strong. However, Diana's straightforward style may struggle against veteran mercenaries who rely on battlefield tricks and irregular timing. Helen recognizes traces of Azo's instruction in Diana's feints and footwork. She also notices that Diana unconsciously copies techniques from opponents she has fought only once, giving her unusual potential. Diana asks Helen to spar, then immediately regrets it when Helen accepts with enthusiasm. Since Helen will travel through the forest that night, the household agrees to accompany her toward town afterward. At the town gate, the guards stare when Azo arrives beside the famous lightning blade. He insists that he is only an ordinary blacksmith, though nobody around him finds that claim convincing. Helen takes her repaired halberd and says farewell, promising to meet again after her next expedition. Camilo welcomes her back and jokes about whether the weapon survived safely. Inside Camilo's shop, Azo asks to sell goods to Count Marius's guards. Camilo understands the request and mentions that another customer has also placed a special commission. The client wants Azo's workshop mark engraved on a rapier. Azo realizes that the requested material is mithril, finally giving him a chance to work with a famous metal that is not ordinary iron. Azo agrees to begin immediately and allows the family to watch. He warns them that mithril behaves differently from familiar materials, so every step must be studied carefully. He starts by heating the mithril and testing it with controlled hammer strikes. Unlike iron, the metal refuses to deform even when it appears to reach the correct working temperature. After several blows, the mithril has barely changed and cools unusually quickly. Azo understands why ordinary blacksmiths cannot handle it and prepares for a much slower process. Working the mithril requires 2 or 3 times longer than stretching normal metal to the same length. Azo compares it to chewing exceptionally tough food, difficult but rewarding once the material begins to respond. Using his enhanced senses, Azo focuses on every tiny change in the surface. The ringing produced by each strike resembles a musical instrument, and the family listens to the beautiful tone in fascination. Because mithril is naturally strong, it does not require conventional quenching or tempering. Riku is amazed that the usual finishing stages can be skipped without weakening the weapon. Azo realizes that the metal is also dangerously delicate in a different way. A poorly placed strike could ruin the entire piece, forcing him to slow down and control every movement. At last, the rapier blade is shaped and ready for its fittings. Azo stops Diana from touching it because the tang has not yet been wrapped and the unfinished weapon is unsafe to handle. When Diana finally lifts the completed rapier, she is stunned by how light it feels. Azo explains that mithril weapons can be as light as feathers while retaining extraordinary strength. Diana tests the rapier with a sequence of swift slashes. The blade follows her movements so easily that her attacks look faster and smoother than usual. The difference becomes even clearer as she accelerates. Eizo watches carefully, evaluating whether the weapon's lightness improves her technique or tempts her into careless motion. Eizo explains that a weapon can both take lives and save them, whether it is a knife or a sword. Mithril's reduced weight makes movement faster, but its purpose remains the same as any other blade. Since Diana says her body feels less strained, Eizo suggests trying the rapier as a training tool. Its lightness may help her practice speed without exhausting herself too quickly. Diana attacks a prepared target and is amazed by the clean penetration. The blade enters with so little resistance that the motion feels almost unreal. Eizo inspects the edge and finds almost no scratching or chipping. He asks Diana to test a direct thrust next so they can evaluate the weapon under a different kind of force. The second test confirms that the rapier handles both slashing and thrusting exceptionally well. Eizo notes that weapons are judged by the people who use them and the purpose for which they are made. After seeing the mithril blade's performance, Eizo admits that his own expectations may have become unreasonable. The material's strength, lightness, and responsiveness are far beyond ordinary metal. Holding the mithril rapier, Eizo hesitates over the responsibility of creating weapons this powerful. A blade can save someone, but in the wrong hands it could destroy far more than an ordinary sword. Eizo imagines how his enhanced craftsmanship might influence future wars. If he carelessly mass-produced extraordinary weapons, his gift could create a darker world instead of the peaceful life he wanted. He compares the rapier with Helen's sword and the Amel heirloom. Those weapons already carry the histories of their owners, reminding him that a smith cannot completely control what happens after a blade leaves the forge. Eizo decides that he must settle his feelings before accepting more dangerous commissions. The family notices his troubled expression and asks what is wrong. He admits that his work could potentially cause enormous destruction. Even when a weapon is forged for protection, there is no guarantee that its power will always be used for the right reason. Eizo blurts out that he cannot bear responsibility for every consequence alone. The admission embarrasses him, but it also reveals how deeply the burden has been weighing on him. The others tell Eizo that they may not understand every fear he carries, but they will not simply abandon him. If the responsibility becomes too heavy, the family will help him carry it. Samiya, Riku, and Diana remind Eizo that he has already used his abilities to save them and create a home. To them, his strange powers are not frightening. They are part of the person they trust. Eizo realizes that true freedom does not mean avoiding every consequence. It means choosing carefully, accepting responsibility, and relying on the people who share his life. Samiya declares that they are a family and will carry difficult choices together. Her simple answer cuts through the complicated fears Eizo has been building in his mind. Eizo thanks everyone for refusing to let him struggle alone. Their support restores his confidence and allows him to return his attention to the work in front of him. The women crowd around Eizo in an enthusiastic group hug. He is nearly overwhelmed, but the affectionate attack finally breaks the tension. Once everyone releases him, Eizo resolves not to waver so easily again. His job has given him a life worth protecting, and he will continue forging with that purpose in mind. Eizo returns to the workbench with a clearer goal. Create what he wants, avoid needless harm, and make tools that are useful to someone. The family immediately notices that his expression has improved. With their support behind him, Eizo completes the remaining fittings. The household's presence turns a solitary burden back into the shared work of their home. The mithril rapier is finally completed. Eizo inspects the finished weapon carefully and confirms that the light blade, guard, and handle all balance as intended. At Camilo's shop, Eizo delivers the rapier and reviews several new requests. The merchant has expanded his network and now receives specialized orders and materials from a much wider region. On the way home, Diana suddenly stops after hearing a faint sound in the brush. She worries that some small creature may be injured nearby. The group discovers a cluster of baby wolves hidden among the plants. They appear cautious but not immediately hostile, leaving everyone uncertain about whether the mother is close. Before they can approach, Eizo senses someone else entering the area. He tells the others to remain still as the unfamiliar presence comes closer. An elf woman steps from the forest and politely asks whether this is Eizo's workshop. Her appearance surprises the household, since elves rarely travel this deeply into the Black Forest. The elf introduces herself and says she has a request that requires Eizo's help. He welcomes her inside, though he warns that the workshop is less elegant than she may expect. She unwraps the object she brought and places it on the table. The damaged weapon immediately draws Eizo's attention because its metal is clearly not ordinary steel. The elf reveals a broken mithril sword. Although the remaining piece is closer to a long sword in size, the original blade was significantly larger before it shattered. She asks Azo to repair the weapon, explaining that concealment magic allowed her to travel without attracting attention. Azo is surprised that she came alone carrying something so valuable. The elf confirms that no companion accompanied her and says she was directed to Azo by a trusted connection. Since the request concerns mithril, she believed his workshop offered the best chance of success. She needs the sword restored within roughly 2 weeks. Azo accepts the deadline but warns that he must first understand why the mithril failed before deciding how to repair it. A second challenge in mithril processing begins. Azo gathers the household around the broken weapon so everyone can learn from a problem, unlike the rapier commission. The elf introduces herself as Lidi and explains that she will remain at the workshop while the repair is underway. Riku welcomes her as another person interested in the craft. Riku says that she is Azo's apprentice and would like permission to observe every stage. Lidi agrees, since understanding the damage may also help prevent the weapon from breaking again. Lidi reveals that she can use elven magic and offers to assist if it becomes necessary. Azo accepts cautiously, aware that magic may be directly connected to the sword's failure. As Lidi studies the Black Forest, she senses that its magical environment differs from ordinary elven territory. Azo admits that strange plants, beasts, and materials appear here far more often than they should. Azo explains that the broken sword contains magical power, but the energy is distributed unevenly. The imbalance may have weakened the blade, even though mithril itself is extremely strong. When the household's living arrangement is mentioned, Lidi misunderstands and assumes Azo has 3 wives. The women react in embarrassed confusion while he quickly denies the interpretation. A separate misunderstanding follows when Lidi compares one of the weapons to an elven lance. The household laughs at how easily technical explanations become tangled across different cultures. For the day, Samiya and Diana handle outdoor chores while Riku prepares the guest room for Lidi. Azo returns to the forge and begins planning the repair. Lidi explains that elves usually prefer fruits and vegetables but are capable of eating meat. Her diet will not create a serious problem as long as the household includes enough forest produce. The family discusses hunting deer and gathering wild plants to balance the meals. Azo promises that Lidi will not be forced to eat anything she dislikes. Azo begins by removing the broken sword's fittings and separating the damaged blade from its handle. Only after exposing the metal completely can he examine the fracture. The ornaments come away one by one, revealing the mithril beneath. The break is irregular, suggesting that the weapon failed from internal stress rather than a simple external blow. Lidi demonstrates a small amount of magic and asks whether it can help reconnect the weapon. Azo observes carefully, since the energy may reveal how the original sword was made. When Lidi releases the spell, the magical reaction is stronger than expected. Azo moves quickly to control the blade while the others retreat from the unstable energy. Azo explains that steel normally requires careful control of fire, temperature, and timing. Mithril behaves differently, but the basic need for a stable internal structure remains critical. He warns that conventional quenching may be difficult or even harmful. The repaired blade could look perfect while retaining weaknesses that cause another sudden break. Lidi channels magic through the fractured section, while Azo holds the pieces in alignment. The spell reveals areas where the mithril's magical flow has been interrupted. Azo is surprised by the strength of Lidi's magic. Her power reaches through the metal in a way his own enhanced senses can follow but cannot reproduce alone. The sword reacts to Lidi and begins accepting the magical connection. Azo confirms that one of his most important questions has finally been answered. The weapon was designed to carry an active flow of power. The separated particles of mithril begin joining under heat, pressure, and magic. Azo watches the fractured boundary fade as the metal's internal structure reconnects. Even after the visible break closes, Azo knows that simply joining the 2 pieces will not solve the underlying flaw. He asks Lidi whether the original magical pattern was ever unstable. Riku examines the cut surface and notices a section that still looks wrong. Azo agrees that leaving it in that state would make another fracture almost inevitable. He concludes that the only safe solution is to reforge the blade while preserving its magical interpretation. Lidi is startled, but understands that patching the break would be irresponsible. Lidi formally asks Azo to reforge the sword from the beginning. She emphasizes that making the weapon usable again matters more than preserving every part of its old shape. Azo removes his outer shirt and begins the demanding reforging process. He knows that the mithril will require more determination and stamina than any ordinary sword. The first day ends with the metal only partially reshaped. Azo leaves the heated fragments to rest, knowing that forcing further progress would damage them. The next stage feels even harder than the first. Azo wonders whether Leidi's magic is gradually becoming more usable inside the mithril, as the internal structure is corrected. Once the main shape is stable, Azo moves to sharpening. The edge responds differently from the rapier, forcing him to adjust pressure at every point. Hours of grinding and polishing leave Azo exhausted. He finally stops for the day, admitting that reforging enchanted mithril is brutally demanding work. After resting, Azo returns from the forest carrying news that a large tree has fallen. He asks Riku to help cut and process the trunk before the wood deteriorates. While the others work, Diana and Samia gather ripe fruit from a nearby patch. Their movements disturb something hidden around the corner. A group of tiny wolf pups tumbles out of the brush. Their unexpected appearance startles everyone, though the animals seem curious rather than aggressive. The pups' oversized ears and bright eyes immediately win over the household. Even Azo has difficulty remaining serious while they stare up at him. One puppy climbs onto Azo and begins licking his face. The others crowd around his legs until he is completely overwhelmed by their affection. When the family returns to the cabin, everyone welcomes the pups and laughs at Azo's condition. Leidi explains that wolves hold an important place among the intelligent creatures of the forest. Azo reflects that his enhanced perception allows him to notice magical qualities in materials and living things. The ability helps him understand why the forest and its inhabitants are so unusual. Azo measures the available space and checks the timber selected for a small shrine. He wants the structure to be simple, properly proportioned, and sturdy enough to survive the forest weather. The shrine is completed in a modest Shinto-inspired style. Azo feels slightly uneasy about recreating a sacred form from his old world, but the finished building fits naturally beside the workshop. Standing before the new shrine, Azo wonders what the gods of this world will think of it. The family watches curiously as he prepares to explain the unfamiliar structure. When asked what he is doing, Azo says it is a place to pray for protection and good fortune. He describes the ritual as a custom passed down in the northern land he claims as his birthplace. Samiya, Riku, Diana, and Leidi ask whether they may participate. Azo agrees and lines everyone up in front of the shrine. Azo demonstrates the sequence of bows and claps, then joins his hands in prayer. The others carefully imitate him, turning the strange ceremony into a shared household ritual. Afterward, everyone returns to breakfast and the day's work. Azo reflects that another unusual custom has been added to the growing life of their family. Azo prays for the workshop to remain safe and for the household to continue smiling together. The others quietly add their own hopes for success, health, and peaceful days. Watching everyone laugh over the meal, Azo feels that his prayer is already partly fulfilled. More than prosperity, he wants this ordinary happiness to last. Work on Leidi's sword resumes, with Riku handling regular orders while Azo focuses on the mithril. Each completed step brings the weapon closer to its final form. The hammering is exhausting, but the sound of properly worked mithril is strikingly beautiful. Azo understands why so few smiths are willing or able to master such demanding material. During a break, Leidi admits that elven lifespans make human lives seem extremely short. She therefore wants to treasure the time she can spend watching Azo's work, rather than treating it as insignificant. Leidi explains that mithril's tone becomes clearer when magic flows through it correctly. Azo listens more carefully, using the sound as another guide to the metal's internal condition. Praise from an experienced elf motivates Azo, though he becomes embarrassed by the attention. The household leaves small prayer tags at the shrine, asking for the difficult repair to finish safely. After several exhausting sessions, Azo finally declares a rest day. He wants everyone to recover before fatigue causes an irreversible mistake in the mithril. The family relaxes around the cabin, while Leidi rests more deeply than expected. Azo decides not to wake her, since the coming work will require complete concentration. When Leidi wakes, she demonstrates another gentle elven spell. The surrounding air responds to her magic, making the forest plants shimmer around her. Leidi explains that magical beasts are more common in places where dense magic gathers. However, monsters do not normally appear without warning unless their natural environment has been disturbed. Azo asks whether the aggressive black bear might have been affected by excessive magic. Leidi says it is possible and warns that killing every changed creature could damage the balance of the forest. The household should therefore be prepared to act without attacking blindly. Some creatures may be absorbing unstable magical power, rather than becoming permanently hostile. Leidi mentions that elves avoid human cities because crowded places and artificial magic are uncomfortable for them. Azo realizes why she traveled directly through the forest, instead of approaching through town. The family uses the opportunity to ask Lydie about elven customs. She answers patiently while making it clear that some matters are personal and should not be treated as entertainment. With the metal stable, Azo enters the final stage of reforging. He straightens the sword, confirms its balance, and prepares the edge for finishing. Lydie asks how the blade could have broken in the first place. Azo explains that even strong mithril can fail if magical stress collects in one section, and the sword is forced to withstand repeated impacts. He adds that concentrated dragon magic, or another overwhelming force, could also destroy a mithril weapon. Lydie quietly considers whether something like that happened during the sword's previous battle. Because the metal's magical channels were disrupted, Azo needed Lydie to return power to the blade while he rebuilt it. Their combined work restored the structure that ordinary hammering could not replace. As the deadline approaches, Azo accelerates the final polishing without sacrificing precision. Every hammer strike is measured against the limited time remaining. At last, the reforged mithril sword is complete. Azo presents it to Lydie and asks her to inspect the balance, edge, and magical response herself. Lydie thanks Azo and declares that the weapon feels better than she expected. The restored blade responds smoothly to her magic, and no longer carries the weakness that caused it to break. As additional payment, Lydie offers research information useful to the workshop. She shares what elves know about magical metals, enchantments, and the conditions that affect rare materials. She also describes unusual skill stones and merchants who trade dangerous or forbidden abilities. Azo listens carefully, recognizing that such items could become either valuable tools or serious threats. Lydie mentions medicinal plants and ingredients that can be obtained from elven settlements. Azo considers trading for them if a safe route can be arranged without exposing the forest home. Before leaving, Lydie thanks the entire household for its help and hospitality. She promises to practice controlling her magic more carefully, so the reforged sword will not be damaged again. Lydie says she had a wonderful time despite the difficult repair. The family invites her to return when she is free, not merely when another emergency occurs. Azo tells Lydie that the workshop will welcome her whenever she comes back. She accepts with a smile and departs through the forest, carrying the completed mithril sword. At Camilo's shop, Azo learns of a new request involving goats and transport animals. Camilo is evasive about the exact quantity, which immediately makes Azo suspicious. The animals have been causing trouble after eating fruit and wandering through fields. One even charges toward Diana, forcing the group to retreat before the situation becomes more chaotic. Azo points out that moving goods with ordinary horses is becoming increasingly difficult. Camilo suggests a stronger creature that can haul heavy cargo through rough forest paths. The proposed animal resembles a large flightless dragon or lizard. Despite its intimidating appearance, it has been trained to pull carts and obey basic commands. Azo confirms that the creature is not the same type of dragon he imagined from legends. It is a practical working beast rather than an intelligent, fire-breathing monster. The animal eats both meat and prepared fodder. Azo asks how much food it requires, worried that feeding such a large body could become expensive. Camilo calculates the cost of a single meal and assures him that the creature is efficient for its size. Regular forest game and vegetable scraps should cover most of its diet. After some negotiation, Azo agrees to take the animal. The price is high, but the increased hauling capacity should save considerable time and labor. The family helps attach the creature to a reinforced cart. Azo checks the harness carefully and asks permission before touching it, so the unfamiliar animal will not panic. Diana reaches out and discovers that the creature's skin is surprisingly warm. Its calm response reassures everyone that it is comfortable around the household. The animal quickly accepts attention from Samiya and the others. By the time they finish preparing the cart, it already feels less like equipment and more like another family member. Azo takes the cart out for its first proper trial. The creature launches forward with enough power to make the entire group grip the sides in surprise. The speed is impressive, and the animal handles rough ground better than a horse. Azo begins planning improvements to the reins, seat, and suspension. Compared with ordinary carriages, the new cart can carry 4 passengers and far more cargo without slowing significantly. Azo still wants to test the true load limit before trusting it on long trips. The creature runs eagerly through the forest, responding to simple commands. Even with a loaded cart behind it, the pace remains smooth and controlled. Azo notices that the lower back of the cart bounces too much over uneven ground. He decides to add proper suspension and improve the driving seat before using it for regular deliveries. The test group returns to the cabin earlier than expected. Azo thanks the animal for its hard work and gives it time to drink and recover. Samiya offers fresh meat as a reward. which the creature accepts immediately. Eizo jokes that they should decide on a proper name before everyone invents a different nickname. The family debates whether the animal is male or female and suggests names based on famous horses. Since nobody can easily tell its sex, the discussion becomes increasingly unhelpful. The creature repeatedly makes a soft kururu sound. The family decides that kururu suits it perfectly and is easy for everyone to remember. Kururu responds calmly when called by the new name. The simple reaction convinces the household that the choice has been accepted. Eizo begins constructing a small shelter for Kururu near the cabin. The building must protect the animal from rain while leaving enough room for its large body and tail. Kururu watches Eizo prepare a large wooden tub for drinking and washing. Its eager expression makes the animal look far more intelligent than its intimidating shape suggests. The new shelter is slightly tight, but Kururu follows Eizo inside without complaint. He plans to enlarge it later if the animal continues growing. Back at Camilo's shop, Eizo confirms the payment for the goats and Kururu. The merchant also mentions a separate sword commission tied to recently disputed mining rights. Eizo asks where the unusual material came from and learns that the source is connected to rights over a mineral deposit. Control of the mine has become a sensitive political issue. Camilo explains that the agreement would allow selected minerals to be imported without forcing Eizo to travel to the mine himself. There are limits, but the arrangement could greatly expand the workshop's materials. Kururu becomes distracted during the negotiation, forcing Eizo to steady the animal. Camilo laughs and says he does not expect extra payment merely for waiting a few minutes. On the way through town, Eizo notices rising tension over the mining rights. Merchants are nervous, border criminals are active, and even ordinary residents are beginning to feel the dispute. The family heads home with Kururu pulling the cart, discussing the tense atmosphere they noticed in town. Eizo senses that the dispute over mining rights is affecting far more people than Camilo admitted. A cloaked attacker suddenly blocks the road and threatens to kill them. Eizo orders Kururu to stop, keeping the cart steady while he places himself between the stranger and his family. The ambush does not feel like an ordinary robbery. The attacker ignores their valuables and focuses on the weapons, making Eizo suspect that the encounter was deliberately arranged to test or contact him. Before Diana can respond, the cloaked woman moves with startling speed and forces her to drop her weapon. The attacker then demands that everyone else disarm. Eizo studies the stranger and notices features hidden beneath the cloak that differ from Samiya's beastfolk traits. He assures the worried family that he is unharmed and continues watching for the woman's real objective. The attacker lowers her weapon and unexpectedly thanks Eizo for stopping. As her hood shifts, her unfamiliar eyes and dark complexion become visible. She points to one of Eizo's blades and demands to know where it came from. Her interest is directed entirely at the craftsmanship rather than the group's money or supplies. Eizo answers that he forged the weapon himself. The woman's surprise makes it clear that she spent a long time searching for the person who created it. Eizo warns that he will defend his companions if she attacks again. The stranger agrees to speak peacefully, while he remains ready to involve the guards if the situation becomes dangerous. The woman explains that she has been tracing the weapon across the region. Its construction convinced her that the smith who made it might be capable of fulfilling a highly unusual request. She asks Eizo to create a weapon specifically for her. Eizo senses that accepting may bring serious trouble, but he agrees to hear the conditions before deciding. The stranger insists that she must visit the workshop alone the following day. Eizo accepts the condition, provided she comes without hidden allies and does not threaten the household again. Before leaving, the woman reveals that she is a demon. Eizo is startled but does not immediately reject her, deciding that her behavior matters more than her race. Eizo's inherited knowledge recalls stories of the demon realm, its rulers, and legendary battles against human heroes. Those tales also mention extraordinary weapons forged for both sides of ancient conflicts. One legend claims that a master craftsman created the holy sword used by a hero to defeat a demon lord. Riku believes Eizo's ability may already exceed the smith described in that story. The family asks whether Eizo can safely make a weapon for a demon. He admits that the commission may be politically dangerous, but refusing solely because of her race would contradict how he has treated everyone else. Eizo recognizes the painful possibility that a weapon forged here could someday be used against humans, or even against someone he knows. Even so, he decides that fear alone cannot determine every commission. Diana says she has already chosen to trust Eizo's judgment. If he believes the demon's request can be handled responsibly, she will not oppose him. Eizo reasons that demons and humans are equally capable of causing harm. The real issue is the customer's purpose, the weapon requested, and the limits he establishes before forging it. He sets a personal boundary. He will not knowingly create tools for indiscriminate killing or deliberate oppression. Within that limit, he is willing to judge the demon as an individual client. The next day, the cloaked visitor arrives at the cabin exactly as promised. Eizo steps outside to meet her while the rest of the household watches from a cautious distance. When she removes the hood, the family recognizes the attacker from the road. Eizo asks whether this is her true appearance, since the cloak had concealed more than her face. The woman has dark skin, pointed ears, and features resembling an elf. Eizo cautiously identifies her as a dark elf, though she seems amused by the incomplete description. Her small horns initially look decorative, but she confirms that they are part of her body. The detail makes her demonic heritage impossible to dismiss as a disguise. She explains that a spell confuses perception and prevents most people from seeing her true form clearly. Eizo's enhanced senses allowed him to notice the inconsistencies and see through the magic. Rather than begin negotiations while everyone is tense, Eizo invites the visitor to share a meal. She accepts, becoming the workshop's strangest dinner guest so far. The family gradually relaxes as the woman behaves politely at the table. Eizo tells her that whether she is an elf or demon, she will be treated as a guest while inside their home. The visitor introduces herself as Nilda. Riku prepares the guest room, and Eizo tells Nilda that she can remain overnight while they discuss the commission. Dinner preparations continue around Nilda, who watches the household's efficient routine with interest. Ingredients gathered from the forest are turned into a substantial meal for the unexpected guest. Eizo notices that his bread making has improved considerably. The loaves are more even and easier to handle, showing that ordinary kitchen work can develop through practice, just like smithing. When the dishes are ready, everyone carries them to the table. Nilda studies the unfamiliar food before accepting Eizo's assurance that it is safe and filling. Nilda tastes the meal and immediately approves. Eizo asks for honest criticism, but she says the food is excellent without needing polite exaggeration. During dinner, Nilda describes the demon realm and the weapon she once carried. She mentions a red-haired warrior wielding a lightning-fast thunder sword, a description Eizo recognizes as Helen. Nilda explains that she fought the red-haired swordswoman, but neither side achieved a decisive victory. Helen's quick thunder technique destroyed Nilda's weapon during the encounter. Although the duel ended without a clear winner, Helen told Nilda that her ability was impressive. The compliment only strengthened Nilda's determination to obtain a better blade. Nilda asks Eizo to forge a weapon capable of surviving another match with Helen. She does not want an effortless victory, only a blade that will not fail before her skill can be tested. To demonstrate what she needs, Nilda performs several controlled movements with a temporary weapon. The speed and precision confirm that she is a genuine master rather than a boastful client. Nilda says she crossed dangerous territory searching for the craftsman responsible for Helen's blade. Rumors eventually led her to the Black Forest and Eizo's hidden workshop. She also heard stories about a mysterious bandit carrying an unusually powerful engraved weapon. Those rumors helped her connect several exceptional blades to the same unidentified smith. Nilda admits that most of her magic was spent hiding her appearance and traveling through human lands. Eizo asks about firearms and other demon weapons, but she says they are not relevant to her fighting style. Nilda praises Eizo's soup while joking that his cooking is as impressive as his weapons. She asks whether elves ever visit the workshop, having heard that one recently stayed here. Eizo mentions Lady, and Nilda reacts with respect, referring to an influential elder sister figure among the elves. Hosting someone of that standing is considered a significant honor. Before work begins, Nilda joins the household at the small shrine. She watches Eizo demonstrate the prayer ritual and copies the bows and claps with surprising seriousness. Nilda asks whether the gods distinguish between demons and humans. Eizo answers that he does not know, but everyone who seeks safety in Asana's work is welcome to pray there. Eizo asks Nilda to describe the exact weapon she wants. Rather than name a familiar local sword, she demonstrates its shape and the way she intends to draw it. Using a practice blade, Eizo recognizes a design resembling the katana of his former world. The single-edged curve and drawing style differ sharply from common swords in this country. Nilda confirms that her previous weapon followed the same general form. It was shattered by Helen's quick thunder, leaving her determined to replace it with a stronger custom version. Eizo takes Nilda outside and asks her to demonstrate the draw and swing. Watching the technique directly will allow him to choose a blade length that matches her reach and speed. Karuru wanders into the practice area, startling Nilda with a loud cry. Eizo calls the animal back and introduces it as the household's harmless transport companion. Nilda says creatures like Kururu are common in the demon realm, though they are often larger and more difficult to handle. Her familiarity quickly calms the animal. Nilda resumes the demonstration, combining speed, balance, and controlled footwork. Azo decides that a practical performance tells him more than any verbal description. She executes a series of broad slashes and rapid changes of direction. The movements confirm that the weapon must remain stable even when drawn and redirected at extreme speed. Azo watches the arc of every swing and notes how Nilda's body rotates. Her technique looks effortless, but the momentum would place enormous stress on an ordinary blade. He tests several wooden lengths and concludes that a slightly shorter blade may suit Nilda better. The reduced size should preserve reach while improving control during her fastest attacks. Nilda agrees that the shorter form feels easier to draw and recover. Azo plans to make a longer weapon later, if the first model proves too limited. Azo hands her a short wooden mock-up resembling a kadachi. Nilda practices with it and approves the balance, giving him a reliable starting measurement. Back inside, Azo sketches the katana's profile on a wooden board. He studies the martial arts knowledge remaining from his old world, while adapting the design to local materials. The custom model will use a hard cutting edge supported by tougher steel. Because Azo cannot obtain every traditional Japanese material, he must reproduce the same principle with what the forge provides. Nilda asks whether she may watch the process. Azo allows it, as long as she stands safely and does not interrupt when he needs complete concentration. The household gathers around as Azo begins his first attempt at making a katana. He prepares the charcoal, metal pieces, and tools needed for the unfamiliar construction. Azo starts by forging the base steel and sorting it according to hardness. Although the tools differ from those of his old world, the fundamental method remains recognizable. He heats and folds the metal repeatedly, driving out impurities and creating an even structure. Nilda follows each stage closely while Riku assists with the heavy work. Azo shapes the prepared steel into a long, flat piece and separates the portions intended for the edge and core. Riku understands that the different materials must later be combined precisely. He explains that steel that is too hard will break, while steel that is too soft will bend. The katana must join both qualities so the edge cuts well without sacrificing the entire blade. Azo combines the harder edge steel with the tougher core, bending the flat piece around the inner material. This layered construction is the kobuse method he remembers from traditional Japanese sword making. He stretches the combined steel into a long bar called a sunobi. Azo believes Nilda's former weapon may have been made in a similar way, though he cannot confirm it without seeing the original. As Azo hammers, the metal scale bursts away with sharp popping sounds. Kururu and the others jump at the noise, and he apologizes before returning to the delicate shaping. Azo adjusts the length, thickness, and balance, then rounds the point slightly. He plans to cut the decorative groove and complete the final shaping the following day. Before quenching, Azo explains that the steel's carbon content and internal structure must be considered carefully. Improper cooling could create cracks or excessive brittleness. Although he studied the theory in his former life, Azo relies on his enhanced blacksmithing skills to judge the heat. The knowledge guides him, but experience and perception determine the exact moment. Azo coats the blade with a clay mixture, varying the thickness along the edge and spine. The uneven insulation will produce different cooling rates and create the sword's temper pattern. He lowers the heated blade into water and watches the curve form. The contrasting hardness creates a visible hamon, giving the sword both strength and a distinct appearance. The cutting edge becomes harder while the back remains more flexible. Azo is satisfied that the blade should cut sharply without snapping under the stress of Nilda's powerful swings. Azo stops for the night and tells everyone that the sword will look completely different after polishing. Nilda waits eagerly for the final stages. During the break, Azo experiments with a new loaf using an apple-based yeast starter. The first fermentation succeeds, and he prepares the dough for baking. The bread comes out of the oven golden and fragrant. Azo calls everyone over, curious whether the new method improved the texture as much as he hoped. The family tears open the loaf and discovers an exceptionally soft, fluffy interior. The result is far lighter than their usual bread and immediately becomes a favorite. Diana says the bread is as good as anything served at a noble estate, while the others praise its sweetness and texture. Azo is honored by their enthusiastic approval. Nilda asks what kind of person Azo truly is, since his cooking and forging both seem impossible for an ordinary craftsman. He answers simply that he is a blacksmith. Azo privately admits that his abilities come from unusual advantages, but he refuses to define himself only by them. The work, practice, and people around him have become just as important as the gift. The next morning, Eizo returns to the katana and begins polishing the blade. Riku watches closely while the rest of the family handles the day's forest gathering. Eizo confirms that the blade reached the correct quenching temperature. He explains that excessive heat would ruin the structure, while insufficient heat would prevent proper hardening. Because the edge and spine cooled at different speeds, the sword developed its characteristic curve. The transformation also created internal stresses that must be relieved through careful finishing. Eizo polishes the blade gradually, moving from rough stones to finer surfaces. Each stage reveals more of the steel and brings the edge closer to its final sharpness. A clear hamon appears along the finished edge. Eizo identifies the pattern while Nilda and Riku admire the bright line running across the sword. He files the groove, refines the tang, and drills the hole needed for the retaining peg. These small details ensure that the handle will remain secure during violent movement. Eizo engraves the blade with deliberate strokes. The mark is not decoration alone, but a permanent record of the workshop that produced the weapon. When the engraving is complete, the characters form Eizo's workshop signature. Nilda studies the unfamiliar inscription and asks what it means. Eizo explains that the writing is a private script from his homeland, rather than the local alphabet. He avoids revealing its true origin, presenting it as another northern craftsman's tradition. Nilda accepts the explanation and happily approves the mark. To her, the inscription makes the sword feel even more like a unique weapon created specifically for her. The completed blade is placed in a temporary white wooden sheath while Eizo works on the permanent fittings. Nilda is delighted by how refined it already looks. Nilda remains at the workshop for several days while the scabbard is finished. She discusses the Black Forest's dense magical energy and admits that the place feels unusually powerful even to a demon. She explains that demons sometimes command monsters, though many beasts simply follow stronger creatures. Eizo wonders whether Camilo's trade network has ever encountered materials originating from the demon realm. Eizo shapes the final sheath to match the blade exactly. He checks the fit repeatedly so the sword will draw smoothly without rattling or scraping the edge. The katana itself is now complete, with the polished blade seated safely in its scabbard. Eizo presents it to Nilda for final inspection. He adds the guard, pommel, and remaining fittings while maintaining intense concentration. Since the weapon is unfamiliar to local craftsmen, every part must be made by his own judgment. Nilda remarks that the detailed work suits Eizo's patient personality. He jokes that a blacksmith who can do many things is still only a blacksmith. To protect his background, Eizo repeats the story that he learned from an unusual northern craftsman. He avoids mentioning that the katana design comes from memories of another world. On the final day, Eizo focuses on the scabbard's surface and decorative treatment. The work requires precision but is less physically demanding than forging the blade. He applies a dark lacquer, adds restrained decorations, and completes the handle wrap. When every component is assembled, the custom katana is finally finished. Nilda draws the sword and immediately feels the improved balance. She performs several test motions and declares that the weapon responds exactly as she hoped. After a decisive practice strike, Nilda announces that the old weapon has been completely surpassed. The new katana feels stronger, faster, and far better suited to her body. Eizo mentions an old tale in which a swordsman's blade was judged by extraordinary sharpness. He asks Nilda to test the katana carefully rather than trusting excitement alone. Nilda raises the sword and begins a controlled demonstration. The blade follows her movement so smoothly that she needs little effort to accelerate it. She launches into a rapid series of slashes, producing arcs too fast for the others to follow clearly. Eizo watches the blade rather than her body, searching for any sign of instability. Nilda's movements become increasingly difficult to track as she combines footwork, drawing, and turning attacks. Even Eizo cannot be certain that he saw every motion correctly. When she stops, Eizo asks how the weapon feels and whether Helen truly defeated her before. Nilda catches her breath, comparing the new blade with the one that shattered in their duel. Nilda calls the katana amazing and says she can feel no discomfort anywhere in the swing. Eizo offers to adjust it the following day if any problem appears after longer use. Still excited, Nilda examines the edge and fittings from every angle. She repeatedly praises the weapon, leaving Eizo embarrassed but relieved that the commission succeeded. With the work complete, Eizo turns to payment. He dislikes pricing unique weapons, so he asks Nilda what compensation she considers fair. Nilda produces a considerable number of coins. Eizo hesitates, worried that accepting too much would be dishonest even for a custom katana. Nilda explains that custom orders are valued not only for materials but for the smith's experience, reputation, and future maintenance. Eizo accepts a reduced but still substantial payment. Nilda also offers a beautiful red gemstone saturated with magical energy. Unlike ordinary gems, it seems to glow from within even without direct light. Azo recognizes the stone as a concentrated magical resource. Nilda says it is difficult to obtain, but its power makes it useful for enchantment and advanced crafting. The gem is considered rare even in the demon realm, and could sell for roughly 40 gold coins. Azo is shocked by the value, and becomes even more cautious about accepting it. Nilda insists that Azo must learn to set prices for his own work rather than forcing clients to decide. She argues that underpricing extraordinary craftsmanship is unfair to both smith and customer. After considering the commission's difficulty, Azo agrees that the offered payment is fair. He accepts the gem and promises to use it responsibly. Nilda prepares to return to the demon realm. Azo asks her not to take unnecessary detours through human territory, and she promises to travel directly and avoid provoking anyone. Before disappearing into the forest, Nilda mentions an elder sister figure waiting for her report. Azo watches her leave, wondering how influential her true position may be. Because the Demon Commission could have political consequences, Azo decides to write Marius a careful letter. He describes the situation without revealing more than necessary. At the capital, Marius receives the message while dealing with a royal assignment involving monsters. The king has ordered House Aimul to support a dangerous subjugation mission. Marius considers where to obtain dependable equipment for the troops. He immediately thinks of Azo and proposes placing an official order through the Black Forest workshop. Back in the demon realm, Nilda is summoned before a powerful woman whom she addresses as her ruler. The meeting reveals that Nilda's journey was connected to far greater interests than a personal sword. The demon ruler examines the katana and remarks on the human-like craftsmanship. Her elegant staff and magical presence show that she is both politically and personally formidable. Nilda explains that the great war between demons and humans is beginning to move again. Exceptional weapons may become important if the fragile peace collapses. The ruler asks to examine the sword directly. Nilda hands it over, confident that the weapon will demonstrate why Azo's workshop deserves attention. After testing the edge, the ruler praises its sharpness and balance. Nilda adds that the blade has shown no chipping, warping, or loosening even under her strongest attacks. Nilda says the client who forged it lives alone with his household deep in the Black Forest. The remote location and lack of political affiliation make the mysterious smith even more intriguing. In the demon realm, Nilda explains that the dense Black Forest is naturally isolated and filled with dangerous beasts. The hidden workshop inside it appears to be protected by an unusual human magic or hardened spirit. The demon ruler finds it strange that such a talented smith works in a remote location and sells ordinary cutlery. Nilda confirms that Azo produces both exceptional weapons and simple household goods. Far away, Azo suddenly sneezes while speaking with Camilo. The merchant asks whether he is ill, unaware that powerful demons are discussing the workshop at that very moment. Camilo presents a formal contract for a large order of longswords. The next delivery will require far more weapons than the workshop usually produces. Azo accepts the order and plans to leave portions of the work to Riku. He asks Camilo to prepare the necessary materials and promises to return once the batch is complete. A letter from Marius confirms that the swords are intended for an upcoming military operation involving monsters from the northern region. Azo is warned that the requested number may increase. Camilo officially identifies himself as the client and shakes Azo's hand on the agreement. The large commission will test whether the small forest workshop can produce consistently at scale. Back home, Azo announces the challenge. The workshop must mass-produce longswords without allowing quality to collapse. Everyone agrees to help organize the work efficiently. Diana is assigned to prepare casting molds. Samiya handles deburring and rough cleanup, and Riku takes responsibility for finishing. Azo coordinates the stages and performs the most demanding forging. The household arranges the forge like a simple production line. Each person repeats one task, passing the piece forward so the next stage can begin immediately. Azo reminds everyone that speed matters only when the work remains smooth and safe. Rushing one stage would create defects that slow the entire process later. The forge grows unbearably hot as several people work at once. Even with the doors open, the household begins sweating heavily under the sustained heat. By the end of the day, the team completes 10 longswords. Azo is impressed that the improvised system already produces more than he expected. They adjust the positions of tools and materials to improve efficiency for the next day. Azo believes they can finish the full order without dangerous overtime if the process continues this smoothly. While everyone works, singing gradually fills the workshop. Azo realizes that his family has naturally created its own rhythm for repetitive labor. When Eizo asks whether the singing is forced, the others laugh at the idea. Riku insists that music makes the heavy work easier rather than turning it into unwanted pressure. Riku begins a traditional dwarf work song about swinging hammers and conquering mountains. Her strong voice echoes over the sound of the forge. The song continues with playful verses about tools, good food, and rest after honest labor. Even those who do not know the words begin following the rhythm. Eizo praises Riku's singing, surprising her with how closely he listened. The others agree that her voice suits the workshop perfectly. Riku explains that dwarves use songs to coordinate work and preserve stories. There is nothing shameful about singing badly as long as everyone joins with sincerity. Eizo notes that Diana is human, Samiya is beastfolk, and Riku is a dwarf, yet the workshop treats everyone equally. Riku says any dwarf who mocks another race for honest work deserves criticism. Riku happily declares that she will become a blacksmith worthy of the dwarf name. Her enthusiasm turns the work song into a declaration of pride in her craft. The melody becomes so memorable that Diana and Samiya begin singing along. Even Eizo catches himself keeping time with the hammer. Diana adds exaggerated dance steps while continuing her assigned task. The performance makes the others laugh without interrupting the production line. Eizo briefly wonders whether there should be formal songs for blacksmithing in this world. His absent-minded comment makes the family think he is asking for another performance. During a break, Eizo notices Diana's hands have become rougher from repeated work. He takes her hand to inspect the skin and check for cracks or injury. Eizo applies medicine brought from the family's supplies. Diana is surprised by the attention, but he insists that preventing small injuries is part of maintaining the workshop. The treatment soothes the soreness, though Diana's palms remain calloused. She admits that she is glad her hands now show evidence of useful work. Samiya says she admires hands like Riku's because they reflect years of craftsmanship. Eizo reminds them that overwork is still dangerous, even when calluses are a source of pride. The women compare their hands and the different lives each pair represents. Eizo sees traces of hunting, smithing, sword training, and noble upbringing gathered around one table. After the long day, everyone falls asleep quickly. The mass production schedule has exhausted even the strongest members of the household. The following day, the workshop resumes its organized routine. By evening, another larger group has been completed successfully. Rows of finished longswords are inspected and arranged for delivery. Eizo confirms that the blades meet the promised quality despite being produced in greater numbers. Camilo visits and hears the household singing while it works. He jokes that the forest workshop has developed traditions of its own. The merchant reports that a large number of soldiers are being mobilized, and the swords are urgently needed. Eizo understands why the order could not be delayed. Camilo adds that the client may request even more weapons, along with supporting equipment. The army's supply needs extend far beyond swords alone. The proposed assignment includes meals, tents, repair tools, and respectable pay. Eizo would be treated as a civilian blacksmith accompanying the military, rather than as a combat soldier. Camilo reveals that the client is Earl Amul. Marius has been entrusted with the expedition and specifically requested Eizo's support. Marius has already reorganized his soldiers, secured royal approval, and provided an initial payment. The scale of the preparation makes the mission impossible for Eizo to ignore. Eizo agrees to the request for his brother-like friend and begins arranging the schedule. He promises the household that he will not depart without explaining everything this time. Over the following week, Eizo prepares tools, clothing, food, and equipment while maintaining ordinary life at home. He worries about leaving the family but knows the expedition may protect the entire region. A familiar traveler returns to the workshop after another long expedition. Her exhausted condition immediately reveals how difficult the journey has been. The woman collapses into sleep almost as soon as she reaches the cabin. Eizo lets her rest while the others quietly organize her belongings. Diana says she wants to protect Marius during the coming mission. Eizo promises to handle the preparations and asks her to help the exhausted guest recover. When the departure day arrives, the household gathers around the loaded cart. Everyone offers advice, warnings, and promises to return safely. Kururu pulls the carriage along a smoother route than before, making the trip faster and less exhausting. Eizo appreciates every improvement he added to the cart. At the Capital Plaza garrison, Eizo is admitted after the guards confirm his identity. A military captain welcomes him and directs him toward the supply unit. Eizo meets Leroy, a former colleague of Marius who now holds a leadership position. Leroy greets him informally and asks that they avoid excessive ceremony during the mission. The supply unit explains the rules. Eizo will repair weapons, meals will be provided, and a clerk will record completed work. Replacement parts and damaged equipment must be properly logged. Azo is shown the repair tent and temporary sleeping area. He is told to rest while he can, since the camp will become far busier once the troops begin moving. The head chef, Sandro, introduces himself along with Martin and Boris. Their loud, welcoming personalities reassure Azo that at least the food division is well organized. Mathis, who manages the carriages and transport crews, apologizes for the rough working conditions. Azo is surprised to learn that knights also perform ordinary chores when the expedition requires it. That night, Azo rests near the campfires and thinks about the journey ahead. The mission already feels harsher than his usual trips. Even before the army leaves the capital, the supply staff prepares rations, tents, firewood, and repair materials. Azo observes how every role supports the soldiers even when those workers never enter direct combat. Several women arrive at the camp running under heavy luggage. Their energetic entrance draws attention from everyone nearby. A young civil officer reaches the supply unit exactly on time, despite appearing completely exhausted. Azo learns that she was sent to coordinate records and logistics. Azo offers her water and introduces himself as the blacksmith recruited for the expedition. She asks him to remember her, since their work will be closely connected. The officer identifies herself as Frederica Schulte. She explains that damaged equipment will be reported through her office before being delivered to Azo for repair. Frederica organizes the records and immediately orders the group to move out. Azo follows the supply caravan as the expedition finally begins. The convoy carries firewood, water, food, cooking equipment, blacksmith tools, and countless other supplies. Loading and unloading the heavy cargo quickly leaves Azo's back and hips aching. Older soldiers tease Azo for feeling the strain, while younger men appear to suffer even more. Frederica joins the jokes but continues watching the inventory carefully. The army travels for hours before stopping near a river. Soldiers and support staff use the water source to rest, refill containers, and prepare the next march. Azo notices that the temporary campsite lacks an organized waste system. He advises Camilo's representatives and the supply leaders to establish proper latrines and drainage before illness spreads. As the expedition continues, a younger knight asks Azo about the effective range of repaired weapons. Azo answers while realizing that he forgot to bring Diana along for the discussion she would have enjoyed. Frederica begins her first full day of logistical work by collecting repair counts and supply records. When she notices Azo's simple dried meat, he offers her a piece to help her through the long shift. A planned delivery arrives incorrectly sorted, forcing Frederica to reorganize the supplies. She reluctantly accepts Azo's dried meat after realizing she may not have time for a proper dinner. Frederica tastes the preserved meat and is surprised by how delicious it is. The small snack gives her enough energy to continue working without leaving her station. After noticing Azo's aching back, Frederica suggests using a small cushion while he sits. He decides to make a simple support for himself before the strain becomes a serious injury. As the camp settles into routine, Azo learns more about the supply staff. Sandro and the other cooks are well known in the capital, while Mathis comes from a stable family experience with horses and transport. A support worker demonstrates a skill related to activating minerals and improving materials. Azo recognizes the ability as useful for military maintenance, even though it looks unremarkable at first. On the second day, Frederica brings Azo an unfamiliar piece of equipment and asks whether he can use it. He examines the item before deciding how it should be repaired or adapted. Azo makes Frederica a practical cloth apron to protect her uniform while she works near the repair area. She thanks him enthusiastically for noticing what she needed. By the third day, the expedition reaches a temporary branch camp. Azo studies the crowded site and realizes that weapon damage will increase once the soldiers begin operating from there. Azo sets up a compact field workshop with a forge, work table, and storage area. The soldiers joke that the new station looks like an official branch of the Black Forest workshop. Behind the work area, Azo places a small goddess figure to watch over the repairs. Frederica admires the improvised shrine and the polished knives and scissors prepared for camp use. Azo learns that military repairs are compensated according to recorded labor and materials. Frederica reminds him to report every completed job so he is paid fairly, instead of quietly giving away his work. At the kitchen area, Sandro asks Azo to sharpen several worn knives. The cooks have kept them usable, but the expedition's constant meal preparation has dulled the edges. Azo examines each kitchen knife and begins restoring the edges. He removes as little metal as possible so the tools will last through the remainder of the mission. The knives are returned properly aligned, sharpened, and maintained. Sandro thanks Azo and promises that the next meal will reflect the favor. The kitchen staff prepares a generous meal using the newly sharpened tools. Azo laughs as the cooks insist that anyone who finishes poorly will answer to them. Azo repairs damaged barrels and reinforces their fitting so water and food will not leak during transport. The routine work is less glamorous than swordsmithing, but just as important to the expedition. While handling a magical blade, Azo senses that the surrounding forest contains unusually dense power. He suspects that stagnant magic may be influencing the monsters in the region. Frederica arrives with a written list covering damaged weapons, armor, and barrels. The repair queue has grown large enough that Azo must organize the work by urgency. Several longswords need edge repairs, while shields and spearheads require new fittings. Azo counts the items and tells Frederica when the first group should be ready. More damaged equipment continues arriving as patrols return. Azo adjusts the work area and asks the support staff to separate dangerous failures from ordinary maintenance. By evening, Azo finishes the day's assigned batch. Frederica accepts the completed items and promises to bring only the highest priority repairs the next morning. Breakfast consists of warm soup filled with meat and vegetables. The satisfying meal restores Azo after a night of continuous hammering. Frederica arrives late and apologizes, explaining that she was organizing additional supplies. Azo assures her that the repaired equipment is already prepared. She thanks Azo and becomes embarrassed when he compliments how well she is handling the pressure. He tells her that worry will not improve the repairs, so both of them should work steadily. Frederica insists that she is not troubled, though her expression says otherwise. Azo decides not to press and allows her to return to her duties. Azo helps load long-handled tools and adjusts their bindings for transport. Frederica's practical experience prevents several supplies from being packed in ways that would damage them. A slender figure among the troops catches Azo's attention. From the pointed ears and graceful movement, he realizes that an elf has joined the expedition. Mathis brings a damaged carriage fitting, and Azo reshapes the iron until it fits correctly. The transport chief thanks him for restoring the part without requiring an entirely new assembly. Azo tells the older workers that sharing knowledge and labor is simply his job. He cannot solve every problem alone, especially while the expedition remains far from the capital. A custom blade is brought to Azo with instructions that magical power may be added later. He agrees to prepare the weapon now and attach the special component when it arrives. Frederica reports that several inquiries have also come from the soldiers. Azo asks her to bring in the next person, rather than allowing the repair line to become disorganized. A young blacksmith nervously asks Azo to fix a sword he damaged while trying to improve it. Azo promises to do his best, though the boy admits he may have made the problem worse. Azo studies the blade with unusual seriousness. He understands that restoring the young smith's confidence may matter as much as repairing the metal itself. Because some weapons may decide whether soldiers live or die, Azo prioritizes them over routine work. He wants every critical item returned as quickly and safely as possible. At the command post, Azo repairs a badly damaged shield and reports the unrecoverable parts. The support officers separate usable equipment from items that must be replaced entirely. A pale-haired man asks that an elf woman be called in for the morning briefing. Azo watches the formal exchange, sensing that the visitor holds an important role. Earl Amel arrives with the elf and orders everyone else out of the room. He thanks Azo for coming and prepares to explain the true purpose behind the mission. Once the room is cleared, Marius tells Azo there is no need for formal titles or payment between them during the private discussion. He begins introducing the elf at his side. Someone waits outside the command room and is invited in. Azo turns toward the entrance, expecting another officer or messenger. To his surprise, Lydie steps into the room and calls his name. Azo and the others stare at the unexpected reunion. Lydie and the pale-haired commander recognize one another from earlier work. Their polite conversation suggests that the elf has been involved in military planning for some time. Marius explains that the squad's mission is to locate the source of the monster outbreak in the deepest part of a cave. Lydie has been called because her knowledge may help identify the magical cause. The army contains many new recruits whose skills remain uncertain. Azo notices one captain who appears capable but cannot behave carelessly because the troops are still inexperienced. Diana enthusiastically tells Lydie that Azo is a sword master as well as a smith. Azo tries to dismiss the exaggeration, while she proudly calls him the Rose of the Sword Arena's teacher. The pale-haired swordsman says he originally thought the claim was merely provocative. After observing Azo's composure, he begins reconsidering his first impression. A soldier asks Azo to demonstrate a strike against an ordinary man's sword. Azo refuses to attack recklessly, and invites the man to approach only under controlled conditions. Lady tells Eizo that the swordsman is willing to be tested and can defend himself. She believes the exchange will help the group understand one another before entering the cave. Eizo listens to the request and considers the risks. The atmosphere makes it clear that his answer will affect whether the soldiers trust him during the mission. The swordsman bows deeply and promises to protect his wife with his life. His sincerity convinces Eizo that the request is not an empty display of pride. Lady says she will place the man in Eizo's care. Eizo agrees and tells the officers to prepare the necessary gear so the demonstration can be handled safely. 2 days earlier in the Black Forest, Sumia sensed something unusual among the trees. Her reaction marked the beginning of the family's anxiety over Eizo's distant mission. Diana continued practicing outside while watching the road. The household tried to maintain its normal routine. Though everyone noticed Eizo's absence, Sumia admits that she expected Eizo to return sooner. Diana says he would be disappointed if they neglected their own work while worrying about him. Riku and the others clean and organize the workshop before Eizo's return. They want him to find the forge ready, rather than a house overwhelmed by anxiety. Diana detects the familiar scent of the Imel family, and becomes worried about Marius. Her concern for her brother makes the waiting more difficult. Sumia reassures Diana that Eizo promised to come home. Diana repeats the promise to herself, using it to steady her fear. The others remind Diana that Eizo never breaks a promise lightly. She resolves to trust him and continue helping with the household's preparations. As dinner approaches, the family finishes its remaining chores. Diana keeps glancing toward the forest path while pretending not to be impatient. At the military camp, Eizo is given formal clothing from the Imel estate. The outfit fits surprisingly well and makes him look far more noble than he feels. A maid helps Eizo dress and provides a short sword and matching equipment. He is relieved that the weapon he finished earlier suits the clothing. Frederica asks whether Eizo has any military experience and admires the uniform. He admits that he has none, despite looking convincing in the supplied attire. Frederica orders everyone to assemble at the command post for the next phase of the mission. Eizo wonders whether Marius could have warned him about the formal presentation. The troops gather to celebrate the completion of a major operation. Marius announces rewards and jokes that the Amel treasury cannot provide an empty room to everyone, drawing laughter from the exhausted soldiers. Marius addresses the assembled troops and declares that today marks the first real step toward the future they are trying to create. He expects the achievement to be remembered as their first victory. The expedition reaches a cave entrance surrounded by signs of monster activity. Eizo notices that the location seems to attract creatures from a wide area, rather than sheltering only those born inside. At the mouth of the cave, the commanders halt the column and review the plan. From this point onward, the units will proceed carefully and rely on coordinated signals. Marius and the reserve guards remain near the entrance while the advance group moves deeper. The cave extends farther than expected, but branching paths appear limited enough to map. Lydie explains that magical density increases with depth and that monsters may be born where stagnant power accumulates. Eizo realizes that the cave itself could be continuously producing enemies. A monster suddenly attacks Captain Leroy from the darkness. He reacts quickly, blocking the strike as the front line shifts into combat formation. Black smoke pours from the creature as it falls. Lydie senses that a powerful leader may be controlling the monsters through magic rather than simple instinct. Lydie explains that monsters can form from stagnant magical energy, while others may be deliberately created or manipulated. The difference will determine whether clearing the cave solves the problem. The defeated creatures dissolve and return to magical particles instead of leaving normal bodies. Eizo sees how completely they differ from ordinary forest animals. If a leader is sustaining the others, the swarm could continue growing without a natural limit. Lydie warns that a magical barrier or breeding source may be hidden farther inside. A small monster appears almost directly in front of them, as though it was born moments earlier. The event confirms that the cave is actively generating enemies. The formation is interrupted by another sudden attack. The soldiers turn toward the threat while the elves prepare to clear a path with magic. A monster bursts from concealment and nearly catches Leroy. Eizo shouts a warning as the captain twists away from the ambush. Green-skinned creatures gather in the passage ahead. Eizo recognizes them as goblin-like monsters and raises his weapon to protect the support group. Eizo meets the first attackers with rapid slashes. His enhanced combat ability allows him to cut through the narrow passage without striking the soldiers around him. The goblins fall more easily than expected. Eizo remains cautious, knowing that their weakness may be intended to exhaust the group before a stronger enemy appears. The guard squad advances over the defeated creatures and tightens its formation. The next chamber is wide enough for multiple monsters to surround them. A soldier orders the others to open a path for the main guard unit. Azo and Leroy push forward, clearing the center so the formation does not become trapped. Beyond the passage, Lighty becomes visibly tense. The enemy concentration is stronger ahead, and she begins preparing a large spell. Rows of goblins fill the chamber below the ledge. Behind them, a much larger shape waits in the darkness. A huge ogre-like monster rises from among the smaller enemies. Its size and magical pressure identify it as the likely boss controlling the chamber. Azo orders the soldiers to handle the goblins while he confronts the boss. He asks Lighty to support him with magic and prevent the creature from escaping. Lighty draws the mithril sword Azo repaired for her. She confirms that she is ready and begins channeling power through the blade. Azo recognizes the weapon as the same sword restored at his workshop. Seeing it prepared for battle reminds him how much depends on the quality of his repairs. The boss charges and Azo intercepts it with a powerful slash. The monster's mass forces him backward despite the clean contact. Azo attacks again, but the creature moves far faster than its size suggests. He realizes that ordinary timing will not be enough to defeat it. Lighty remains behind the front line and continues gathering magic. Azo checks that she is safe while keeping the boss's attention focused on himself. At Lighty's signal, the soldiers launch a coordinated attack. Azo moves aside at the last moment so their weapons and magic can strike the boss together. Azo chooses defensive movements that let him protect the formation while continuing to fight. His combat advantages allow him to react instantly when the monster changes targets. The boss absorbs magical energy from the surrounding goblins and rapidly heals its wounds. Lighty warns that it will keep recovering as long as lesser monsters remain nearby. A violent impact shakes the chamber as Azo lands another heavy blow. The monster staggers, but the remaining magical energy prevents it from collapsing. Lighty tells everyone to get down and releases a large spell. The soldiers drop behind cover while magical power floods the chamber. The attack tears chunks of rock from the cave and hurls debris across the battlefield. Azo shields himself as the shockwave passes overhead. A massive explosion engulfs the boss and the remaining goblins. Heat and dust fill the chamber, temporarily hiding everything from view. When the smoke begins clearing, the soldiers cautiously search for movement. For a moment, it appears that Lighty's spell may have ended the battle. The boss rises again from the rubble, wounded but still alive. Its furious roar proves that the magical core survived the explosion. Azo charges before the monster can regenerate fully. He strikes toward the head and mouth, targeting the places where magical energy seems most concentrated. The boss tries to retreat toward the surviving goblins, but Azo blocks its path. He refuses to let it absorb another source of power. Lighty warns that the leader may spawn or summon more monsters if it is not defeated quickly. She has lost sight of the remaining goblins in the smoke. Azo orders the soldiers to pull back while Lighty prepares another attack. The group retreats to a safer distance without turning its back on the boss. A supporting weapon fails under the strain, showing that the subjugation attempt is reaching its limit. Azo searches for another way to purify the cave without sacrificing more people. When the first battle ends, the exhausted unit returns to camp for a simple meal. The soldiers discuss the boss's regeneration, and the deeper source of magic still hidden inside. Azo is told that fighting will resume the next morning. He spends the night repairing as much damaged equipment as possible so the troops can return fully armed. The next day's mission cannot be delayed because the cave is continuing to produce monsters. Azo works through the remaining repairs while the commanders finalize a new plan. Azo asks Lighty whether the magical source can be sealed or purified. She hesitates, suggesting that the known method may demand a price he will not accept. Lighty explains that forests rich in magic can recover naturally, but enclosed places like the cave may keep accumulating corrupted power. The situation resembles a wound that cannot drain. She recalls that monsters appeared there before and required a long subjugation. The same sword and magical technique were used then, but the purification was incomplete. The traditional solution requires someone to offer their own life as the final magical catalyst. Lighty quietly reveals that complete purification may demand such a sacrifice. Azo rejects the idea immediately. He refuses to accept a spell that saves the village only by consuming Lighty's life. Lighty remembers her older brother who sacrificed himself during a previous battle against a monster born from the same corrupted magic. His death allowed others to survive. The monster was defeated, and the subjugation squad recovered, but the source remained. Lighty has been carrying the expectation that she may eventually need to complete what her brother began. Lydie insists that she is prepared to protect the village even at the cost of her life. Azo tells her that repeating her brother's sacrifice is not the only possible answer. He vows to destroy the monster and seal the source using the weapons and people available now. Lydie is startled by his confidence, but begins considering another path. Under the night sky, Lydie asks Azo to count on her during the final battle. He agrees, provided she also trusts him and does not secretly sacrifice herself. The expedition enters the cave again with the revised plan. Soldiers take their positions while the advance party moves toward the boss chamber. The march follows the same route as the previous day, but everyone is more prepared for sudden attacks. Azo keeps the repaired weapons and signals within easy reach. The boss attacks as soon as the group enters its territory. Leroy's unit holds the smaller monsters while Azo advances toward the leader. Azo tells the soldiers to leave the boss to him. He draws its attention and creates an opening for Lydie to reach the magical source. The monster swings with enormous force, but Azo dodges and counters. One attack narrowly misses him as he closes the distance. Azo slips inside the creature's reach and lands a heavy strike. The boss recoils, unable to use its full strength at such close range. A counterattack catches Azo and sends pain through his stomach. He remains standing, relieved that the blow did not cause a fatal injury. Azo realizes the monster deliberately created an opening to lure him forward. He narrowly avoids the follow-up attack and refuses to repeat the mistake. The boss roars and raises its weapon for a crushing blow. Azo braces himself, waiting for the exact moment to respond. Azo intercepts the attack with his spear, but the shaft bends under the monster's strength. His enhanced ability keeps the weapon from breaking completely. Azo uses the bent spear to redirect the monster's strike and fires a powerful counterattack. The boss howls as the blow tears into its defense. He throws himself forward before the creature can recover. Every movement is focused on reaching the magical core hidden beneath its massive body. Azo drives his weapon into the boss with all his strength. The impact forces the monster backward and opens its guard. The prolonged battle finally exhausts Azo. He remains upright through sheer determination, breathing heavily while searching for one last opportunity. Lydie rushes to Azo and asks whether he is all right. He assures her that he can continue, though her worried expression makes the seriousness of his injuries clear. Azo says his stomach hurts, but nothing appears immediately life-threatening. Lydie checks him carefully before allowing him to move again. Azo grips Lydie's hand and reminds her that he kept his promise. He stopped her from sacrificing herself and helped defeat the monster through their combined efforts. With the boss finally destroyed, the corrupted creatures disappear and the magical pressure rapidly weakens. The others help Azo out of the cave while the cleared chamber is secured. The commanders review the aftermath and admit that an unknown factor may still have influenced the outbreak. The cave is safer, but the true origin of the disturbance remains uncertain. The expedition begins returning from the cave. Azo is supported by the others, relieved that everyone important survived the final operation. Frederica records the casualties, damaged equipment, and completed objectives. Her reports will determine how the mission is judged once the army returns to the capital. Marius thanks Azo, Lydie, and the supply staff for making the successful subjugation possible. He gives the exhausted workers permission to rest while the remaining troops secure the area. Marius discusses Azo's reward and offers additional blacksmithing supplies from the Imel estate. He hopes better equipment will make future work faster and easier. Azo tells Marius not to worry about extravagant compensation. If the official report must include a reward, useful materials, and continued support for the workshop will be enough. Marius then raises another matter connected to the cave in the nearby village. Azo listens as Lydie's expression becomes serious again. The recent magical storm and the earlier subjugation force both caused severe damage. Many villagers were displaced, and the local elves suffered heavily while protecting the area. The village's population has fallen sharply, and the remaining elves are spread across temporary shelters. The cave and surrounding outpost may need to become a permanent station for future recruits. Marius asks Azo to let Lydie live at the Black Forest house. The request is blunt enough to leave Azo momentarily speechless. Marius explains that relocating the elves to ordinary human villages would take too long and create serious cultural problems. Few communities can accept a large elven group immediately. Lydie says she is willing to remain with Azo as long as she does not burden the household. Her expression shows that she has already considered the possibility carefully. The surviving elves will be redistributed among safer settlements, but Lydie no longer has a stable home to return to. Azo understands that the workshop may be her best option. After thinking it through, Azo accepts Marius's request. He agrees to welcome Lydie into the household, rather than leave her isolated after everything that happened. Lydie thanks Azo warmly, while he says no additional gratitude is necessary. Her arrival will bring new knowledge, magic, and another person to the growing workshop family. Lydie explains that she has spent most of her life separately from ordinary elven families, while learning blacksmithing and magic. Living at Azo's workshop may finally give her a place where both interests are accepted. As Lydie smiles toward her new home, the workshop prepares to welcome its first permanent elf member. Azo's supposedly quiet, slow life continues expanding into a larger and more diverse family.